The Rise of Iceland. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story and all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 126, Discover the Mine. Thinking of Vinland's colorful agricultural planting, Olaf wanted to eat grilled corn and boiled pumpkin. At the same time, he estimated that the tomatoes were about to mature, and he could use lamb fried potatoes with tomato sauce. There are also tomato scrambled eggs, tomato stew, lamb chops, tomato sauce and pasta. Olaf thinks far away. As soon as he thinks, he laughs to stop his distracting thoughts, then gets up and goes to the workshop to watch the production of the craftsman. After Olaf left the factory that afternoon, he took Tom, Salrak, Harry, and Val, who were looking for him to play in the test field outside the city, broke hundreds of corn and 7 or 8 big pumpkins, and also dug potatoes. The sweet potatoes were brought back to the city. A group of teenagers worked together in the kitchen of Olaf's home to mash up grilled corn, syrup, stewed pumpkin, whale fried potato chips, sweet potato chips, and stewed ketchup. Then they all had a big meal with beer. Now as the age grows, most of Olaf's playmates are over 15 years old. The older ones are even grown-ups. They are currently the production captains or team captains in Adinjong under the jurisdiction of Viking race parents. There is a lot of work to do, and there are fewer and fewer days to play on weekdays in the evening. While everyone was eating and drinking, Yuluji, Eriksson, and Harlek also brought 7 or 8 Icelandic teenagers over. They left until midnight that night. All the teenagers drank a lot of alcohol. It was Olaf who also drank 5 glasses of beer, then went back to his bed and fell asleep. The next morning, Olaf was pushed awake by Jelny. He opened his eyes and saw his sister staring at him with big sky blue eyes flickering and flickering. When he got up, his breath dissipated, and he stretched out his hand in a relaxed mood and squeezed the creamy plump sister cheek, couldn't help kissing, and said, "What's the matter? My little princess." Gelny's skin is white, his hair and eyes are the same as Olaf's inherited from his mother. He has a pair of smooth golden hair and a pair of pure sapphire eyes. Gelny is only 9 years old this year, but she has grown into a slim girl. She is slender and handsome. She wiped her face and said, "Father asked me to call you." He said that the miners in the city had just returned. Brought back the good news, the eldest brother has rushed over with half. Olaf jumped up from the bed after hearing Jelny's words, put on his trousers and jacket, and asked, "Where are Dad and Big Brother? It seems to be a chamber." Before Jelny's words were over, Olaf walked out of the room quickly, and then quickly walked out with a piece of cold bread after a brief wash. What can it be? Is it possible to find a gold mine? Olaf thought as he walked. The thoughts in his mind kept flying. He only hated that he knew too little about Newfoundland and Canada in his previous life, and now he can't remember whether there were gold and silver mines on Vinland Island. When Olaf walked into the chamber, he saw Hader sitting at the table with Kadir, Heine, Naranhu, and Hild discussing something intensely. Their faces were full of smiles and excitement. At the corner of the round table sat a decently dressed middle-aged man. Olaf recognized him as the technician in charge of mineral exploration. He was an Englishman named Jeremy Hunter. "Olaf, you are here. Haha, to tell you the good news, Mr. Hunter helped us find gold, iron, and coal mines. Nalanhu is worthy of being the father of the little white bear Halleck, and he is also straightforward and strong." He got up and laughed, patted Olaf on the shoulder and almost knocked Olaf down. Olaf was not angry, knowing he was happy, so he sat next to Heine, and before he spoke, Hader handed over a sketch paper in his hand and said, "This is Mr. Hunter, who has been working hard for more than a month. The results, come and see." Heine took it and handed it to Olaf. After thanking Olaf, he looked down and found that the 2-foot-long and 1-foot-wide yellowed paper was a map of Vinland Island outlined with charcoal and graphite pens. Obviously it belonged to Mr. Hunter. Handwriting: there are no places such as Herat City and Bakken City on this wetland map, but the Central Plateau, various wetlands, lakes, and Southwest Mountains, and the Northwest Mountains are all clearly drawn. Obviously this is a simple topography. The picture may be different from reality, but it is definitely close to reality. Olaf watched little by little and found that at the southwest corner of Vinland Island, There is a Changling mountain that traverses the northeast from the southwest and reaches the southwest of Changhu Lake for hundreds of miles. The land in the northeast of Wenland is like a long stick. A Changling mountain runs through the north and the south. In Mr. Hunter's drawings, there are several symbols on the south side of the foothills of the Changling mountain, with English annotations on the side, suspected gold mines, confirmed copper mines, and several symbols on the west of the Changling mountain. A symbol, also an English annotation, determined the coal mine in the northern part of Changling mountain. It is also marked, identify the iron ore. Unexpectedly, Mr. Hunter found several mineral deposits in Wenland in more than a month. It is really hard. Olaf spoke politely, and found that Hunter was not polite, but he asked directly, Mr. Hunter, how many mineral veins you have discovered? Are they easy to mine? Mr. Hunter shook his head lightly, and then said, under the leadership of the indigenous guides and escorts dispatched by Your Excellency, we started to explore the southeast peninsula, but no veins were found for the time being. Generally, the veins are buried along the mountains. We know that Wenland it's very big. After trying to explore the hinterland plateau but didn't find it, we applied to Your Excellency yacht for a ship to go ashore around Vinland Island to find it. This speed and efficiency will be higher. We found mineral-rich stones in the Changling Mountains in the southeast and Changling Mountains in the north. After surveying, we have determined that there are associated ores under the two mountains, except for the copper mines in the South Changling Mountains and the iron in the North Changling Mountains. The mine should be very deep, dozens of feet deep. On the mountain surface should be permeable rock. The mineral content will be very low, mining is inconvenient and the value return is not high. Hunter's words cooled the hot atmosphere in the hall. Olaf's question was like pouring cold water on everyone. Knowing that the veins were buried deep and the mining value was not high, Hader frowned. Olaf heard Hunter's following www.wuxiaspit.com before he sold the goods. He asked again and again, Mr. Hunter meant that the coal mines on the west side of Changling mountain are easy to mine. Hunter shrugged and said, Master Olaf is really keen. Yes, after our exploration, everyone agreed that the copper mines in the southern hilly areas and the iron mines in the northern Changling mountains are deeply buried and difficult to mine. But many areas of coal mines in the southwest belong to open-pit coal mines. 7 or 8 feet below the surface is the coal mine zone. Okay. Mr. Hunter, you are very good. Olaf patted both hands, got up excitedly, and found everyone looking at him puzzledly, and smiled. The use of coal mines is too great. We have mined coal mines in the southwest, and in the future we will be able to master something that is more combustible and higher in heat than wood. Fuel, and more importantly, coal is more resistant to burning than firewood. With coal mines, we have more fuel. When we remine copper and iron ore, we will be able to make steel by ourselves. With steel, copper and other metals, you can forge your own weapons, and you won't have to rely solely on imports from Europe in the future. Still looking for Iceland Rise free novels? Baidu direct search. It's easy to read novels. Chapter 127, There are pirates from afar. Hader and Heine were the first to understand what Olaf meant. They remembered what Olaf said before, that Vinland must develop industry if it wants to be strong or even protect itself, and to develop industry, coal and iron must be available. Heine nodded and said, although copper and iron ore are difficult to mine, we have cheap labor. Let slaves slowly mine, it will always gain. As long as we are willing to invest in manpower, I think we can have our own iron smelting in the future. Factories and weapons factories. Hader was touched by Heine's words, so he got up and said, after the full autumn harvest at the end of next month, as long as the grain production can meet our expectations, then planting will be able to reduce labor by more than half in the future, and we can save those saved. The slaves went to mine, guys. Since we have mines on the border of Wenland, we have to mine no matter how difficult it is with coal mines and iron ore. Wenland's industrial development is imperative. During a brief meeting in the chamber, Hader ordered Heine to notify the city of Buckins, which is closer to the Changling Mountains in the north and south, and asked Blackstone to mobilize manpower to build housing camps at the 3 vein points on the map for future miners to live in. Before the meeting, Hader remembered the things Olaf had reminded himself many times before, and said loudly, we do not have the support of European powers behind Wenland. Every step we take depends on the common struggle of all of us, so we must take care of your mouth. For example, news about our high-yield mineral production and mineral mining in Wenland must not be leaked. If it attracts the attention of the Dutch, English, French, and Spaniards in Europe, Vinland may be facing a war in the future. So please, Everyone must not leak all the secrets of our Wenland agriculture and industry. If anyone dares to divulge, this general will ban his family to Greenland. Remember, yes, General." After the meeting, a Viking rode out of the city of Groot with Hader's handwritten order, and headed to the hinterland of Bakens at the same time. The south and east coast ushered in a group of uninvited guests. There is a simple wharf on the east coast of Plymouth. At noon that day, 5 tall armed merchant ships suddenly surrounded the port. There was no one near the port. After 5 armed merchant ships docked, hundreds of soldiers wearing plate armor, muskets, and spears were disembarked. They were discovered by residents weeding in the farmland near Plymouth. They saw that they were parked. The ships in the harbor did not fly the flag of England, Scotland, and the United Kingdom. They knew that there were enemies or pirates. They hurriedly picked up and ran into the city to report to Governor William and Speaker Miller, leader of Cadisle. Plymouth City is the high ground with more than 10,000 steps ahead. McGonagall has gone through a lot of hardships, and his personality is now different from before. He looked at Cadisle with a grin, and pointed to the distance. Said a group of buildings similar to villages and towns faintly visible everywhere. Now McGonagall knows that he is in the hands of Kadir for this purpose. Only by relying on Kadir and the Viking Legion in his hands can he avenge himself and the elder Brest, George, and Byram, and only rely on Kadir himself. In order to have the opportunity to represent the Puritans to regain control of Plymouth City, every proud and arrogant person will always become more humble and realistic after being beaten by reality. McGonagall now feels that it seems difficult to straighten up after the remote sensing is bent, but what is there? Kadir picked up the crooked helmet and put it on, then turned on his horse, raised the long knife in his hand, and shouted, "Lined up!" The 500 Viking soldiers and the 500 White Wolf soldiers had acquired the qualities of a professional soldier after years of training, and they lined up quickly when they heard the command. Before disembarking, the 500 Viking soldiers were replaced by plate armor, and the White Wolf soldiers were also replaced by leather armor. Therefore, there is no need to stop after the formation. With a wave of Kadir's long knife, a row of 5,000 soldiers is like a long dragon. As he hurried forward, his footsteps were neat and rapid, and he left the range of the port in a short while. Cadisle, McGonagall, Polly, and Bren took the lead on a mixed horse under the crotch, and the city of Plymouth in front of them became clearer and clearer in their eyes. Speaking of a city, in fact, Plymouth is just a camp with wooden fence walls. It does not have a castles and walls like Quebec City. The Plymouth colony was established in the autumn of 1620. It has been developed in a relatively short period of time. In addition, it has faced several aboriginal attacks and plagues and famines. Even though hundreds of thousands of contracted white slaves are taken by the Plymouth Company and Crick every year, the company sent it. By this year, Plymouth's population is still slightly smaller than that of Virginia at present. Plymouth has less than 1,000 people, including more than 100 Puritans, 40 or 50 people including the governor and guards of Plymouth, and the rest are all free people and contracted white slaves. The population is small, and the time period is incapable of building a city. Originally, it was enough to deal with the indigenous people by relying on the fence and the matchlock in their hands, but they did not expect that professional soldiers like the Viking Legion would appear as their opponents at this time. Governor William and Speaker Miller in Plymouth had already gathered behind the fence with all the guards and young men in the city. More than 600 adult men and 47 guards lined up. Governor William and Speaker Miller were lined up. Most of the more than 100 Puritans and guards behind them were holding muskets. The remaining 400 freedmen and contract white slaves only held muskets. The rest were armed with long swords, kitchen knives, spears, and even a few others took hoes and sticks. Don't be afraid. No matter where the pirates come from, we don't have to be afraid of having guns in our hands. Governor William was wearing a half-length plate armor and an iron helmet on his head. The face armor had deformed his most cherished horoscope, and he didn't care about it anymore now. Governor William's eyes are fixed on the army that stretches on the ground in the distance, getting closer and closer. The plate armor of those soldiers reflects the light in the sun, making William's heart more and more cold and his face more and more gloomy. The 4 riding horses are the leaders of each other. Speaker Miller pointed to the hooded knight, who was about to be able to see clearly on the opposite side. He suddenly narrowed his eyes while speaking, and then rubbed his eyes. He stepped forward unbelievably, his eyes widened and his lips trembled, and said, "Yes, it's McGonagall." "It's not the hell." "What?" Governor William yelled, pushed his visor away and looked forward, and then a familiar young man appeared in his field of vision. "It's really McGonagall." William was startled, and then he glared at Miller complaining, meaning that he didn't do things well. Not only did he not kill McGonagall, but instead let him take someone to retaliate. Miller was in a mess, gritted his teeth and said, "Meg is a pirate's running dog. He will bring pirates to our Plymouth to burn and loot. We must kill them." Miller's words excited the Puritans, the guards and even the freedmen. They all looked forward, and when they found that one of the knights on the opposite side was McGonagall, they all yelled at them. For a while, slurs in Plymouth City came and went. www.wooksiaspit.com. In the messy insults to McGonagall, Miller approached William and said in a low voice, "Don't worry, the governor, McGonagall has no more pirates than us. You can see our public sentiment. Exciting, this battle can be defended." William nodded non-committal, but withdrew in his heart. Asshole Miller, things can't be handled well, and he said that he can hold it. It's just whimsical. The number of people on the other side is 700 or 800. I think half of them are wearing plate armor, so the musket must be there. Plymouth's defense force was weak. Freedmen and white slaves could not count on it at all. Puritans and guards were the core forces. By all accounts, we only had more than 130 guns, and less than half of the people who had the right marksmanship were the opposite. The pirates also have 100 or 200 muskets, and Plymouth will definitely not be able to keep this battle. If I can't hold the city, I will find a way to escape. Still looking for Iceland Rise free novels? Baidu direct search. It's easy to read novels. Equals. Chapter 128, White Wolf Soldier. Seeing the military appearance and quality of the woodland army's tidy steps, as well as the number of nearly 1,000 people represented by the long-tailed snake formation, Governor William was already a little afraid to retreat, and he did not think that he could rely on a few. A mob of 10 guards, hundreds of Puritans, and hundreds of freemen and contracted white slaves can resist this terrifying team in front of them. Although Miller spoke hard, his eyes began to circle when he watched Wendland's army getting closer. The guards, Puritans, freedmen, and white slaves behind the two men subconsciously stepped back after seeing the rigorous and aggressive Wendland soldiers, and muttered in their hearts, "Is this a pirate? This is a regular army. I've seen the militia in Cambridge before, and it's not as scary as these people." There was a lot of discussion in the city of Plymouth. Buzzing like mosquitoes and flies blasted. The Podcateer led his army close to the first 500 steps of Plymouth. And he could clearly see the guards, Puritans and others crowded behind the fence in the city. By looking at their standing in state, Cateer knew it was one. Help the mob without professional training. Line up. The White Wolf soldiers charge first on both sides, and the Viking soldiers rush forward. 500 White Wolf soldiers wearing leather armor, holding bows and arrows and long knives, were divided into two teams to outflank Plymouth in a half-moon shape. When they were close to 300 paces, they bent their bows and shot arrows, using their feather arrows to suppress and kill the people crowded in the city. Since the White Wolf soldiers are now equipped with British longbows, their long-range lethality is doubled. Although it can't help the enemy wearing plate armor, for the enemy wearing leather armor or without armor, 130 steps are enough. Fatal injury can also play a role in harassment and injury within 200 steps. In fact, in the age without rifling, the accuracy of front-mounted arquebuses, muskets, and other muskets is not high. Only by focusing on shooting can they have huge lethality. If a gunner and a longbowman are facing each other without armor, naturally, the longbowman can shoot him without waiting for the musketeer to shoot. But the problem is that if you wear a breastplate and a helmet, the longbowman will have no advantage unless he shoots the gunner in the arms. An accurate archery longbowman is very difficult to train, but the musketeer can be in battle within a few months, and he can practice his marksmanship to a more accurate level in about a year. In the war, the longbowman can no longer compete with a musketeer. Therefore, after entering the 17th century, archers in all European wars were dispensable. At present, the arms of various countries are still based on spearmen, muskets, cavalry, and artillery. The difference is that the proportions are different. The guards, Puritans and others in Plymouth are all waiting in the fence. The White Wolf soldiers are all excellent hunters. They have accurate arrows and excellent physical ability. After simple training, they can naturally use the longbow, starting within 200 steps. He bent his bow to shoot arrows, and hundreds of feather arrows smashed into the city like rain. Although they were not powerful because they were too far away, they shot dozens of unlucky people. The morale in Plymouth was instantly collapsed. Most people escaped. The White Wolf soldiers approached and shot arrows. The freemen and white slaves in the city hid, and dozens of Puritans and guards were injured. Seeing that the resistance in the city was getting weaker and weaker, Governor William was heartbroken and said, "You can't stay in the city. There are too many archers on the opposite side, and it consumes us. Now all the staff follow me out of the city. Let's concentrate our firepower to kill the archer on one side, and then deal with the musketeers and spearmen in the middle. Governor William's decision might not be a good choice, but only 40 guards responded, and the Puritans all looked at Speaker Miller. Although Elder Breast has left Plymouth, the Puritans are still united by Miller, hoping to control Plymouth as before, but the departure and serious illness of Elder Breast make the Puritans unable to unify their opinions. Given the opportunity for the Plymouth Company to intervene, a governor was added to the city. Although there was a governor in name, the Council of Puritans still obeyed Miller, and William could only be effective if he cooperated with Miller's orders. Miller knew that McGonagall hated him most, so he dared not delay seeing William's eyes, and hurriedly persuaded the Puritans to organize an attack under Miller's coercion and lure. 90 Puritans and more than a dozen bold freemen armed with muskets and more than 40 guards rushed out of Plymouth City in a second wave of arrows, holding guns. More than 200 White Wolf soldiers approaching the west side rushed over. Although the White Wolf soldiers are now approaching, Miller and William both saw that the Aboriginals were attacking them, and their panic was much reduced. After all, in their years of fighting with the Aboriginals, they all knew that the Aboriginals had no rules in fighting. Relying on the impact of not being afraid of death, as long as one round of more than 100 muskets from the others can defeat the native warrior. Soon the third round of arrow rain struck. This time, because the two sides were approaching 130 steps, a wave of arrows from 200 White Wolf soldiers shot down more than 40 soldiers brought out by William and Miller. Fire! William's shoulder also had a feather arrow that healed the tremor. His face twisted, and he yelled for the order to fire. 110 matchlock guns shot out lead bullets and flames unevenly during people's hurried operation. One matchlock gun exploded because the user stuffed too much gunpowder into the barrel. The iron-lead bullets blurred his arms and chest, and the wounds were bleeding continuously, leaving him lying on the ground. Howling and rolling in pain during this round of shooting, the White Wolf soldiers all lay down in a unified manner, or hid behind rocks or trees. This is the special training that Kadir has conducted for them to develop the White Wolf soldiers' ability to spit out. After the match rope, you have to lie down or look for obstacles around you, so that you can avoid at least 80% of the bullets. This evasion method can only be applied to White Wolf soldiers at present, because they are lightly dressed and sensitive. Only 20 White Wolf soldiers were hit in one round of shooting, and fewer than 10 were hit. The remaining White Wolf soldiers once again bent their bows and fired straight. And the greatest power of the bow and arrow could be exploded from a distance of more than 100 steps. More than 200 feather arrows flew out tremblingly, and shot into the enemy's body. Fortunately, Governor William and Miller fell down in time, or they would be shot into hedgehogs instantly, but the musketeers behind them were shot down by half, and the remaining half were scared and panicked. They turned around. Run away. www.ooksiaspit.com. Wow, puff. Another round of arrows rained down from the sky and shot down all the Englishmen who were still standing on the court. Many people even got 3 or 4 arrows in their bodies. The 250 White Wolf warriors who had arrived on the east side cheered and put away their bows and arrows, and then rushed forward quickly from Governor William to Speaker Miller to all the Puritans, guards, etc. More than 20 out of more than 100 people wear half-length plate armor or breastplate, and the rest are also wearing leather armor. They originally had a good defense against bows and arrows. However, the number of archers is more than twice that of them. In addition, in the last round, they were shot by the eastern and western White Wolf soldiers. Therefore, more than 100 Englishmen were killed or injured in an instant, even if a few were not injured or injured. The heavy one climbed on the ground honestly and didn't dare to resist. Still looking for Iceland Rise free novels? Baidu direct search. It's easy to read novels, equals. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129, Hanged. The effect of this round of shooting was unexpected. On horseback, Kadir watched that the Vikings he led were 200 steps away from the Englishmen who left the city. 2 White Wolf soldiers had already formed against them. Surrounded, several consecutive rounds of shooting unexpectedly knocked down the English easily, and the White Wolf soldiers only paid the price of a dozen casualties. By the time Kadir led the Viking soldiers into the gate of Plymouth, the White Wolf soldiers had already killed the Englishmen who had suffered multiple arrow wounds, and the remaining minor and uninjured people were stripped away, Like the pigs rushed together and surrounded them with long knives. McGonagall saw Miller and Governor William, who were squatting in the corner and unable to dodge his own eyes among the crowd surrounded by White Wolf soldiers. He twisted his waist and jumped off his horse, walked over and asked in a cold voice, "Miller, Your Excellency." "Governor William. We haven't seen each other for a long time." "Yes, yes, yes." Miller got up and squeezed out a smile. When I could not speak, Governor William pretended to be stupid and asked, "Pastor McGonagall, haven't you returned to London? Why are you mingling with these pirates? Please talk to the horseman. I am willing to give up everything in Plymouth City and ask him not to kill his people." "Humph." McGonagall snorted coldly, wanted to scold and remembered his beliefs, and finally reprimanded, "You murdered Elder Brest, George, and Byram, and you want to kill me? God bless, I met Hagrid. Your Excellency and Your Excellency Olaf have only recovered their lives. Now is the time for God to let me do justice and punish the wicked." After McGonagall finished speaking, he turned his head to look at Kettle. His expression hesitated, as if he was brewing how to make a request. The battle-tested Kettle saw the murderous look on McGonagall's face, so he raised his eyelids and said loudly, "What do you want to do with the wicked people in front of you? They have turned their backs on the Lord Jesus' guidance and became shameless wicked people after believing in Satan's temptation. Only you, the pastor, are qualified to judge them. I want to hang Miller and William in Plymouth to deter all villains and lambs who are not strong in faith." McGonagall grinned grinningly, making Miller and William tremble with fright. Miller was better, but William felt like he was about to pee. Mag can't, eh?" Miller and William still wanted to plead, but following Kettle's signal, Brun had ordered several White Wolf soldiers to drag Governor William and Speaker Miller out of the crowd, and then dragged them all the way to Plymouth not far away. In front of the door a White Wolf soldier swiftly turned over and climbed up the door, and then several people wrapped the necks of William and Miller with ropes and tied them to the door, and then pulled hard. What two people who were struggling and crying could make. All the insults and pleadings were tightened in his throat. The Viking soldiers rushed into the city and shouted hundreds of residents in the city to come out to watch the governor and the speaker who were about to die, while the White Wolf soldiers escorted more than 30 surviving prisoners outside the city and walked to the door. The English swearing with an Icelandic accent forced everyone to look up and watch Miller and William struggle in the air, watching their legs gradually straighten, their fingers sinking into their palms, until finally their eyes and tongues burst. "Come out and die completely." All the English people were pale with fright, their bodies trembling, and the only 180 women and dozens of timid white slaves and freedmen had sobbed in low voices. The White Wolf soldiers glared at them, and the British were so scared that they covered their mouths, and their bodies trembled more severely. Gadile, McGonagall and others are very clear that these weeping Englishmen are not crying for the dead Miller and William. They are simply scared. More than 100 people with the most courage and status elected in the 1,000-person Plymouth City have now been killed by White Wolf soldiers. The remaining citizens are honest free people and contracted white slaves. Worried about their future, several free men looked at McGonagall pleadingly. McGonagall looked at Miller and William, who described the terrible, and the bad breath in his heart finally disappeared. He shouted, "May God forgive you for your sins." Reaching out and crossing his chest, he prayed again. McGonagall raised his head and asked refreshingly, "Commander Kadir, I don't know what you plan to do with Plymouth next." Kadir had been ordered by Hader before he left, so he didn't make his own claim, but asked eloquently, "Pastor McGonagall, what do you think should be done with Plymouth?" Seeing McGonagall's panic on his face, Kadir smiled and said, "Hader asked me to help you avenge your hatred and regain the rights of Plymouth. So from now on, Pastor McGonagall is the Lord and Governor of Plymouth. These people are all your people, so how to deal with it should be up to you." McGonagall heard what Kadir meant, and understood that Hader of Vinland had no plan to occupy New England. He was a little touched but also a little settled. Then he bowed slightly and said, "Thank you, Your Excellency Hader." "Thank you Kadir. Your Excellency. I need your support and help in managing Plymouth City in the future." Kadir nodded with a smile, and then promised that his own Vinland army would be stationed in Plymouth for a long time and would not be withdrawn in a short time. Kadir's words are tantamount to giving McGonagall a reassurance. If he leaves the support of Vinland's military force, McGonagall will not be the lord of the city for a day, and now he hangs Governor William himself, which completely offends Plymouth. Although the strength of this company is average, it definitely can't beat Vinland, but it's easy to kill oneself. So the future Plymouth City can't do without the stationing and protection of Vinland's strong soldier. McGonagall walked to the crowd after thanking again and explained the murder of Elder Brest. At the same time, Several of Miller's hardcore men were found out. After being questioned, they also confessed that Miller and William had killed Elder Breast. Plan with George, Byram and McGonagall. The revelation of this fact changed most people in the city's impression of McGonagall. It was no longer pure contempt and fear, but also a trace of understanding of tragic heroes among the surviving Puritans. More than a dozen neutrals and a few people who had a good relationship with McGonagall showed enthusiasm and excitement at this time. They cursed William and Miller, and at the same time, they criticized McGonagall's choice to rely on Vinland as a strong soldier. Decided to give support regardless of their real thoughts. McGonagall announced on the spot that the council to manage Plymouth would be reorganized. The nearly 20 Puritans and freedmen who stood up were the members of the council. At the same time, they took the property of the dead. Give everyone a split. Governor William and Miller had a lot of wealth, and after the division, the citizens of Plymouth had a softened attitude towards McGonagall. The English people are not celestial people who pay attention to famous teachers and moral character. They don't believe in Confucian culture, but believe in the strong. If burning, killing and looting can bring them wealth, then they will burn, kill and looting without hesitation. So after McGonagall gave them the wealth, everyone's attitudes completely changed, because following City Lord McGonagall can get tangible benefits. Although about 60 people died in a siege, most of the people who died were Puritans and guards who had no relatives, so the survivors had no interest in the dead. The citizens of Plymouth didn't feel sorry for them at all. The money and food were divided, and the dead were left behind. Still looking for Iceland Rise free novels? Baidu direct search. It's easy to read novels. Chapter 130, Terrible Viking. After Kadir led 1,000 woodland soldiers to help McGonagall win the throne and power of the governor of Plymouth City, Plymouth quickly restored calm, and then everyone still performed their duties, contracted white slaves to control the land, and free men to arrest for a fish. The Puritans continued to trade glass beads, ironware, linen, and other items with the large and small tribes of the nearby Iroquois alliance. In exchange for the precious fur, Kadir settled down in a church in a corner of the city, and built houses and camps inside and outside the church for his soldiers to live in. All of them had inventory on board for food, drink and clothing, and Plymouth did not need to provide them for the time being. By the next day, Kadir sent someone to Wendland to report to Heir and explained to Heir that Plymouth was already in his hands. Heir, who learned of the news 2 days later, was very happy and called high-level officials to report the news. After an enthusiastic discussion for a long time, Heir tapped his finger on the table and said, "Now New England can no longer pose a threat to our Vinland. The next step is to plunder as much land as possible from the New World." Francis left New France last week. He wrote that he had returned to China to take part in a fight to suppress the rebels. "I have already ordered Hudic and sent 1,000 White Wolf soldiers to help him. I asked him to hurry up and expand." Before Captain France arrived, he tried to control the entire western part of the Labrador Peninsula. "In our hands, as the saying goes, the night wolf before dark is not terrible, and the bird quad in our hands is our own. We took the opportunity to occupy the Labrador area, and Champlain will have no choice in the future. Their New France may not dare to follow us after a done loss. Fight." Haha, Olaf smiled and glanced at the map, and said, "Dad's arrangement couldn't be more appropriate. Don't we want to double the territory of Wendland before this winter? The city of Plymouth is already under our control. The 2 colonies in New England have been taken down by us, as well as the Labrador region of New France and the southern plains of Quebec. We also have a lot of territory outside Vinland Island. As long as we can digest and develop the population, the establishment of a kingdom is already in sight." Heiner laughed, looking at the map of the east coast of North America on the table, pointing, and at the same time glanced at Heir with some persuasiveness. Heir laughed and dreamed at the same time. This picture was created by Mr. Hunter of Wendland and other personnel after the merger of the old map of Wendland and the French survey map donated by Francis. The entire drawing only has the topography of the St. Lawrence River Basin and the north and south of the estuary, and the upper reaches are only drawn to the edge of the Great Lakes. Olaf looked at this drawing, that is, the later generations of the United States and Western Canada are drawn. The northernmost and southernmost regions are not yet among them. The entire area is several million square kilometers. The drawings indicate several strongholds in New France and Quebec City, as well as the colonies of Virginia and Plymouth in New England. There is also a colony of New Netherlands established by the Netherlands in the middle of the 2 colonies. But this colony is currently the weakest. Calculate the power according to the area under control and the population of the colony. Obviously, among the many colonies in the New World, Wendland is the most powerful party. With a population of more than 10,000 people, an actual controlled area of more than 100,000 square kilometers, and 15 armed merchant ships and 1,000 Viking soldiers, 1,000 White Wolf soldiers and 3,000 slave warriors, the two colonies of New England rank second with a population of more than 2,000. The total population of New France is less than 500 people, which is only better than New Netherlands, which has more than 200 people because Europe is undergoing chaotic wars, and countries such as Britain and France are unwilling to use national power to develop distant colonies. According to the consistent traditions of European countries, the country authorizes a company to carry out colonial development by the company. Goods enjoy preferential tax exemption and tax reduction policies at present. Vinland's strength is enough to expel all the colonists from Britain, France and the Netherlands, and fight the big cake of North America alone, but Vinland's foundation is too weak. More than 2,400 whites and more than 10,000 indigenous people cannot carry out large-scale colonial rule. If war is waged against many powerful tribes on the mainland, it will be consumed in a few years. The population is too small to swallow the land of North America, so Hader's current policy is to use Vinland as a base to encroach on the Labrador Peninsula close to Vinland through the Basque City. Now, because of a coincidence, Hagrid and Olaf rescued McGonagall. Hader sent troops to help McGonagall regain the right to dominate Plymouth by the Puritans, and then took the opportunity to actually control Plymouth. This is another means of expansion besides encroaching on the Labrador area, but it is also limited by population and can only grasp the general direction. The actual rule still requires McGonagall to lead the English people to develop colonization with the help of Vinland's forces. McGonagall captured Plymouth by force and became the governor of the area within a few days of the news of the colonists of New France. The closest to Plymouth, Champlain of Quebec City, was in a good mood these days, because he received a reply from Paris last week. Prime Minister Richelieu has issued an order to let Francis return to Paris and participate in the fight against the Huguenot armed forces, and although the Huguenot sect led by Languedoc-Rohan has been weakened by Richelieu's attacks, it still retains the last stronghold in the region and it is difficult to pull out. Richelieu has made up his mind to completely break the last castle of Huguenot next month. Reading www.canchu.com establishes its own prestige by leading the Catholic faith of the whole people and guarantees the authority of the Prime Minister. Since Francis left by boat last week, Champlain has been in a good mood. He only waited for the new French captain to arrive with a ship to report to himself. The next subordinate who does not have Francis family status will definitely become Champlain's hands. The fastest knife. However, Champlain suddenly learned that the Plymouth colony had changed its owners this morning. After Brest, Governor William and Speaker Miller were hanged alive by McGonagall. Vinland's soldiers also moved into Plymouth. Although the colony was nominally regained by the Puritans, it has actually become an enclave controlled by the Vinland Icelanders. Asshole. How did William do it? He was actually hanged by McGonagall? Wouldn't he do things more thoroughly? Although Champlain didn't know what kind of struggle was going on in Plymouth, he guessed it 7 or 8 by hanging Governor William through McGonagall. So he was in a bad mood and cursed. Now New England is controlled by Hader. Colony, as long as he is greedy, New France will be difficult to exist. After getting up and turning around, Champlain quickly picked up his mood, then looked at the cool breeze that had begun to whistle outside the window, and sat down slowly, almost popping out a sentence from his throat. Originally, I wanted to talk to Wenlin. Fighting, now that the strength is getting stronger and stronger, it seems that I can only be a good neighbor in the future. But I'm afraid that Wenlin doesn't want a neighbor. After a long time, there was a harsh sound of sofa rubbing the floor in Champlain's room, followed by a long sigh. The terrible Viking, the terrible Viking. Chapter 131, Harvest. Wenlin was beaming in August. Coal mines, iron mines, copper mines and even gold mines were discovered. The news made Hader, Olaf and others happily walked like stepping on a pile of cotton. Hudic led the Viking soldiers, the White Wolf soldiers, and the slave warriors to run smoothly in the Basque City. 7 or 8 small and medium tribes in the western part of the Labrador Peninsula were wiped out by him, and then he sent the Vikings and the White Wolf soldiers. With some slaves, 5 fortresses were established. When the fortresses were gradually increased and laid, the grid-like camps of Vinland would eventually be formed in the western part of Labrador Peninsula. The inner fort of the first phase of the new growth city built by Yacht and Hoskard also has a framework, and a simple dock has been built in the bay, which can basically last for a month or 2 by fishing, hunting and storing food. Gather food from the warehouse and growth. Plymouth has also stepped into formality. Kadir will send a letter to Herat city every week to report on the situation. The good news in many aspects made Hader always relaxed, and then the happy and relaxed August soon ended. After Woodland entered September, the temperature suddenly turned cooler, and then it was a good season for the autumn harvest. The arable land around Groad is all crops planted after the beginning of spring, and it has grown to its fullest state in half a year. There were 19 Adams in the city of Groad, but Piku took his Inuit to colonize Greenland, leaving only 18 Adams after entering September. The 18 people and slaves of Adam scattered and entered the world to harvest mature wheat and beans, break corn and pumpkins, and dig out sweet potatoes and potatoes that have cracked the ground. The vegetables that were planted had been picked in the previous 2 months, and most of the vegetables were pickled after eating them. Those vegetables can only be regarded as side food. It is this batch of grain that really guarantees that Woodland people are not hungry. There are now a total of 5,000 acres of land outside the city of Groad, of which more than 1,000 acres are cultivated land that has been cultivated over the years, and the remaining 4,000 acres are newly reclaimed land. Last year and this year the plan for spring plowing this year is to allocate 100 acres for planting vegetables, and 2,000 acres for rye, wheat, barley, oats and other grains. 500 acres of corn, squash, and beans were planted with seeds seized from other tribes, and potatoes and sweet potatoes were grown on the rest of the land. The reason why Yod and Hader stipulated this was not simply because they were worried that disasters and diseases in single planting would lead to famines, but also because there were not too many potatoes and sweet potatoes harvested last year. They were completely planted during spring plowing and then waited for germination. Transplanting seedlings can't grow 4,000 acres, and there are a lot of unhusked grains in the warehouse, which just happens to be sown without grinding flour. Therefore, the planting ratio of potatoes and sweet potatoes this year is not too high, but everyone is looking forward to a high yield and bumper harvest of sweet potatoes, and even corn and pumpkins, so that they can be planted on a large scale next year. After more than half a month of autumn harvest, the warehouses of the 3 major forts, Hader Fort, Military Fort, Olaf Factory Fort, in Groot have been filled with mountains of grain. Heine took over the role of yacht and assisted Hader in the supervision, management and overall arrangement of the autumn harvest. After the harvest was completed and the grain was put into storage, Heine took more than 30 educated youths and teenagers to start the calculation. Finally, he was surprised. He told Hader that this year was indeed a bumper harvest. Yacht used to make rough calculations, but Heine worked more seriously. After 3 days of calculations, he made a detailed list of supplies on the paper. The above is all the rations harvested from the 5,000 acres of land in Herod village. Rye harvested a total of 195,000 pounds, barley and wheat were about 180,000 pounds, and oats were 26,000 pounds. The yields of corn and pumpkins are very high. 500 acres of corn yielded 114,000 pounds, and pumpkins yielded 110,000 pounds, which is incredible. There are a lot of beans. We have eaten a lot of fresh beans recently, and now we still have more than 20,000 pounds of dried beans, which is really good. The first list stated the output of rye and corn and other grains, and everyone watched and discussed casually, with smiles on their faces when Hader handed over the second list of potato and sweet potato harvests. Each of them was speechless after reading it. The harvest of sweet potatoes and potatoes is too large to be calculated, but after a rough estimate, sweet potatoes should be 8.5 million pounds, while potatoes are 9 million pounds. Seeing that everyone was silent, Heine thought he was dissatisfied with his work, so he cleared his throat and explained, "God, how much is 8 million? Is it 810,000? How huge is that? Can you imagine it?" Milano shouted, his eyes widened, seemingly unbelievable. Valatu also stretched out his big hand and patted his head, and said in a huff, "I can't imagine it, it's just a lot." Lund exclaimed, "The manure studied by Olaf is good. Let's not talk about potatoes and sweet potatoes, just rye and corn are enough for us to eat, can't finish it." Hilt's face flushed a little, and said excitedly. Everyone laughed, and then Heine relaxed and said with a smile, "This year's harvest is very huge. Although it is still a bit wet, it will reduce a lot if it is dried, about 30% of the weight, but even if it is 70% of the corn, pumpkin and rye are enough for the 2,000 Vikings and over 12,000 slaves in the 3 cities of Woodland and Labrador to eat for 2 years. Everyone in Woodland is basically a manual worker. The men of UU reading www.uucan'tchoo.com. Indigenous slaves eat more than 5 pounds of food a day, while women eat more than half, while contracted white slaves eat better. Vikings, it can ensure that meat is eaten every day. such as fish, wolf, venison, bird meat, etc., but the demand for food is slightly lower than that of slaves. When Haggard was colonizing, there were few people, and only a small amount of farmland. Fishing and hunting could support daily consumption. Following Hader's arrival in Vinland the year before, the colonial rule that began last year has been in full swing. After last year's war of conquest, a large number of people concentrated in the city of Groot. If it weren't for the food collected by tribes and the fishing support of many ships, the city of Groot would starve to death last winter. It was just established. The social order is also falling apart. However, relying on agricultural harvests, fisheries harvests and looting harvests, the city of Groot has survived the hardest winter. After the spring, large quantities of animal hunting increased fur and meat, as well as fisheries and picking. Half a year's time in this year's autumn harvest, I finally harvested enough food to eat. Harder, Olaf, and Heine are not like the others who only know that they are happy. They also thought about if this year's 5,000 acres of land is still planted rye, oats and other grains, and without using manure and fertilizer to increase production, this year's output will definitely not exceed 1 million pounds. This year's 2,000 acres of newly reclaimed land yielded nearly 600,000 pounds of grain. This is still due to the small amount of manure. If the animal husbandry develops further, manure will increase, and grain production will continue in the future. Great improvement. Chapter 132, The Magical Effect of Sweet Potatoes and Potatoes. This year's autumn harvest has profoundly proved the power of farm manure and the advanced productivity of advanced agricultural technology. It also changed the impression of many hard-headed Vikings on advanced agricultural knowledge from the Far East, and strengthened the persistence of Olaf and Hader. The authority of the leader of new agricultural knowledge and new crop planting success can not only improve a person's self-confidence and ability, make people stronger and stronger, but also determine the cohesion and future of an organization. After all, the leader who always makes mistakes will eventually become no longer a leader, and the leader who always makes the right decisions will become a great and wise leader. At present, the decision that Olaf and Hader insist on must be carried out regardless of whether the Vikings understand or recognize it. The result is always beneficial to the collective and the individual. This makes Hader's prestige higher and higher, and the Vikings in Vinland have already gradually reached the level of blind faith. Although Vinland grows 7 or 8 kinds of food, there are actually only 4 high-yield crops: potatoes, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, and corn. Potatoes and sweet potatoes are indeed the highest-yielding foods after the autumn harvest this year. The total output of potatoes and sweet potatoes totaling 17.5 million pounds is very impressive. Although it is insignificant compared to Ireland and England, the grain yield in Iceland is not much higher than that in Vinland. I believe that waiting for another year or two, when the land reclaimed in Vinland increases, in terms of quality, the grain output of Vinland will surpass that of Iceland, a piece of land operated by the ancestors of Icelanders for hundreds of years. To put it bluntly, even if everyone on Vinland Island rolls over and eats the food harvested this autumn, they will not be able to eat it since I can't finish it. I have to find a way to realize it. As soon as Olaf's thoughts turned, he remembered the other 2 uses of potatoes and sweet potatoes. One is to make starch, and the other is to make wine. Potatoes are rich in starch, and sweet potatoes have a high starch content. However, potatoes do not contain sugar and sweet potatoes contain sugar. Therefore, the effect of both brewing is similar, but the starch production rate is higher. Starch can be used to make soups and flavors for dishes, and can be sold to restaurants and palaces at the same time. Starch can also make maltose, and sugar is a profitable business. As for winemaking, potato wine has always been the national drink of the Nordic countries in later generations, and sweet potato wine has a long history in the Chinese dynasty. Olaf felt that the base of potatoes and sweet potatoes was too big. Such a huge amount of sweet potatoes and potatoes must be hoarded, processed, and stored, otherwise they will be spoiled before next year. The production of starch, maltose and wine will produce food residues and distillers' grains. These are good feeds, which are just used to develop aquaculture. Unless the most traditional grazing industry, Vikings can also rely on distillers' grains to lighten the skills of large-scale captivity. Clicked on the morning of September 20th, Hader began to arrange for people to distribute a year's worth of food to all the Vikings, white slaves, and indigenous slaves. This time everyone was allocated 200 pounds of potatoes and 200 pounds of sweet potatoes. Basic rations. The contract white slaves also added some corn and pumpkin, and the Vikings also had 100 pounds of wheat, rye, oats, corn and other grains, as well as 10 pieces of dried meat and 10 pieces of dried fish. These foods are just basic food rations for everyone, and subsidies and wages will be given according to the difference of status and work every period of time. Originally, Hader planned to not give the Vikings land for self-cultivation, but considering that potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn and other crops are not planted on a large scale, after allocating the land to the Vikings will have a stick. They still want to grow low yield and labor-consuming rye, barley, etc. Therefore, this year only half of the Vikings' land was allocated to each Viking family in name, and the dozens of households with a lot of military exploits could get half of the Vikings. At the time when the Vikings were established, the city of Heir consisted of a total of 1,800 multidimensional Jing people and about 200 households. The land division basically consumed all the land. Even the Hader family only had 10 Vikings. Special land. According to the plan, the planting will be concentrated this year and then distributed. Next year, the individual's land will be managed and cultivated individually. However, Hader, Yada and others have already planned. They will follow the guidelines of the draft of the agricultural book next spring to reclaim the land on the west and south side of New Herod in the north, and even send people to guide the Blackstone in Bakken City. The land is also being reclaimed there, and 10,000 acres of arable land must be guaranteed next year. This year everyone's land will be centralized management, and then harvest will be centralized and distributed. Next year's land will be in the hands of individuals. Although Hader will not receive as much tax as the food from centralized management, there is no need to manage Viking slaves in distribution. Naturally, their owners and production team leaders are responsible for the dietary issues of contracted white slaves of each production team. This time the distribution of food made everyone in the city of Grove feel happy, because they saw the mountain of food and got enough rations. In the eyes of the slaves at the bottom of the society, being able to eat is a big deal. Happiness. In 5 days, all the food was distributed, and then Hader sent some of the food from New Grove and Basque City. Hader even sent 10,000 pounds of potatoes and sweet potatoes to Bakkens. To ensure that Blackstone and the efforts of his men will not go hungry as for the Kadir and others guarding Plymouth in the south, in order to protect the high-yielding secrets of sweet potatoes and potatoes from being discovered by the English, Hader only sent freshly ground flour and some pumpkins and beans. After being distributed, part of the stored grain piled up like a mountain was consumed, but it still looked tall and plump. Rye, barley, wheat, oats and other miscellaneous grains still have 400,000 pounds, while corn has more than 80,000 pounds, and pumpkins also have 450,000 pounds. There are more sweet potatoes and potatoes. And a simple estimate will reveal that there are 12 million pounds in stock. Olaf had already turned his notes a few days ago and wrote out the recipes for making maltose and wine. These two formulas are actually very simple, and Olaf is also a skill he learned while reading novels in his previous life. First, remove the spoiled insect eyes and other parts of the sweet potatoes or potatoes, and then wash them to make maltose. You need to chop the processed sweet potatoes or potatoes into small pieces, and then wash them in a container filled with clear water. Wait until the starch in the meat is dissolved in the water, and then filter out the debris to obtain a rich starch liquid. At this time, if you wait for the water to clarify and pour the water away, you can get the starch at the bottom. If sugar is made, the starch-rich liquid needs to be cooked at a high temperature, then the malt is added after it is cooked, and finally it is continuously tortured into a thick juice or even a semi-solid maltose with a unique flavor is also out. That is filtered out when washing. The starch is actually nutritious and can be used for human consumption or livestock and poultry breeding feed, so that potatoes and sweet potatoes become treasures all over the body. Without a trace of waste as for making wine, it is even simpler. The preliminary treatment process for potatoes and sweet potatoes is the same, and they must be steamed after cleaning. After the potatoes or sweet potatoes are steamed, take them out and dry the skins, then pound them into puree in a container, and then mix them with koji. After adding enough koji, you can add half the weight of mashed potatoes or sweet potato mashed water, then add chaff to assist fermentation, and then carry out closed storage. Stir it once a day for the first 7 or 8 days, and then it will be completely closed. Stored indoors for more than a month can be matured. However, Wendland's climate is colder, and it may take about 1.5 months after brewing. It can be filtered and drunk, but the best to drink and store has to go through the distillation process, after which it is almost like whiskey, and it is a high-strength liquor. Olaf's fake brewing recipe was also copied from the books of the Far East Daemon Kingdom. Among Wendland people except Olaf, no one can understand Chinese characters, because it is naturally what Olaf says. And everyone believes Hader has long been familiar with the cleverness and magic of his second son, Olaf, and he did not question the roots. With a wave of his hand, he approved Olaf's application to use stocked potatoes and sweet potatoes, barley, rye, etc. to make sugar and alcohol. So at noon on September 21, www.wuxiaspit.com, Olaf led his 2 Eddings and more than 200 people and hundreds of slaves with ox carts and wooden carts to carry potatoes, sweet potatoes and grain. Olaf personally led the team and took the food to the water wheel workshop thousands of steps upstream of the Musk Ox River. Olaf ordered his production team leader to take the Vikings in groups to clean and process potatoes, sweet potatoes and grain by the river, and then dry them. After the drying is completed, they will start to chop them and then grind them in a water wheel mill. The slaves scattered and felled wood, and then set up workshops in the open space on the side. In the workshops, large pots and chimneys were also built to cook potatoes and sweet potatoes when the sun was westward. The simple workshop was completed, and tens of thousands of pounds of potatoes and sweet potatoes began to be ground. Fresh potatoes and sweet potatoes have a lot of water content. After being cut into small pieces, they are directly ground through a water wheel mill. They are quickly ground into a white slurry, which is then followed by a large pottery jar made by the Olaf factory. When the tank is full, it will be carried to the workshop not far away. Several young and clean women took out the new Hessian cloth and pulled it, and then the others poured the liquid on the cloth. The scum was filtered and left on the cloth. The starch-rich liquid penetrated into the cauldron under the cloth. After pouring a pot of juice, Olaf ordered the slaves to light and cook, and the liquid was quickly boiled. Then Olaf asked him to pour in a pot of sprouting black malt, and then boil it for another hour. The sweet fragrance began to permeate in the middle, and the fragrance of malt became stronger and stronger. Olaf asked him to heat the fire to the fullest, and then stirred vigorously. After an hour, a pot full of liquid was boiled, and only a small half-pot of semi-solidified body was left. Chapter 133, Oriental Caramel. After cooking for more than 2 hours, it is finally time to harvest a viscous maltose syrup. At the bottom of the pot is golden yellow. It looks similar to maple syrup but has a slightly brighter color. The heat and aroma are quite different from those of honey and maple syrup. The aroma is more attractive than honey and maple syrup. Olaf provoked a little with a branch, blew it, and took a sip in his mouth. He felt the sticky mouthfeel and the sweetness of honey. He laughed until the experimental production of maltose was considered a success. Maltose has been successfully produced. Starch is converted into sugar through malt and high temperature. It is sticky and sweet. It is a very good dessert. Mixing with flour to make sugar cubes can pretend to be Far East gaming's sugar products sold at high prices. Olaf thinks that maltose should imitate maple syrup and give it a resounding name, which not only embodies nobility and luxury, but is also mysterious and misleading, making it impossible to replicate. After thinking about it for a long time, Olaf decided to name the maltose dongtang or Oriental Caramel. The traditional Chinese maltose is actually a snack made from rice grains such as maltose, which is also converted into sugar through starch. The principle is exactly the same. Olaf uses maltose to pretend to be Daming's maltose without flaws. The Oriental malt candies were successfully made. Olaf watched the villagers cook another pot soon after seeing the sky, and then stored them in a crock pot and brought them back to the city that night. The dinner in Hatterborg consisted of pine nuts, brown bread slices, maltose, and sauerkraut soup. The 2 little guys, Half and Galney, were growing up. In this meal, each of them ate 3 thick slices of bread, covered with malt syrup diluted with water. They ate his faces full of syrup, and he is happily twisted. For children who have rarely eaten sugar since childhood, it is great happiness to be able to eat a bite of sweet and greasy food. Hader and Katrin and Olav also ate 2 slices. They were also full of praise for maltose. Although they had a lot of expectations for Olaf, Olaf was always able to do things that surprised them all. Very good. Olav wiped his mouth, swallowed the bread in his mouth, then pointed to a plate of syrup on the table and said, "The taste is different from royal jelly. I personally like this one. The fragrance is different, but the Oriental syrup is different. Obviously sweeter." Olaf shrugged, and then said, "As long as we grow potatoes and sweet potatoes in large quantities after next year, in addition to satisfying our own consumption, Wenland's sugar industry will have a huge development in the future. Royal jelly and Oriental caramel will become an important brand in the future. It may even catch up with Spain and England's sugar industry revenue in East and West India." The income from colonization in Central and South America supported the luxurious lives of the Spanish and Portuguese royal families, making them the richest family in Europe for nearly 100 years. Among the colonial incomes in the West Indies, gold mines and silver mines have the highest income from mining. However, As mineral veins have been mined and nearly exhausted in recent years, cane sugar has become another relatively expensive business. There are dozens of hundreds of manors on the north coast of South America and the islands of the Caribbean Sea, all of which are sugar cane plantations, which bring huge wealth to Spain, England, and the Netherlands every year by transporting cane sugar. It is also because there are not many colonies that grow sugar cane, so European countries will compete fiercely around the Caribbean in the 17th and 18th centuries, and many colonies have changed hands many times. Olaf is well aware of Europeans' almost paranoid desire for desserts. Now that with the two major products of maple syrup and maltose, Vinland's pillar industry can become the sugar industry in the future. After all, the fur business cannot last. Wild animals will be nearly extinct in a few years. If slaughter and hunting are reduced, the development of Vinland will be affected. Therefore, Olaf wants to develop the Vinland sugar industry within a few years. Vinland's industry has become an industrial powerhouse where the sugar industry, ceramics, winemaking, fur industry, mining and even the military industry go hand in hand. Only by relying on the rich resources of Vinland and North America to develop multiple industries will Vinland's foundations grow. The more stable the next day, Olaf first sent someone to soak some more wheat seeds, and then ordered the 5 production team leaders under him to take people to the workshop to continue processing maltose. After one of Adam's people left, Olaf took the second Adam's hand with a lot of potatoes and sweet potatoes to the factory in Razor Mountain. This time, after cleaning the sweet potatoes and potatoes, Olaf ordered the people to put the washed potatoes and sweet potatoes into a large pot and steam them. After 2 hours, they opened the lid and opened a few and found that they were soft and well ripe. Take the stone hammer and stone mortar made by the masons to mash the sweet potatoes and potatoes separately, and then put them in a large tank and mix them with koji. The koji is one of the many miscellaneous items bought in Europe, and the chaff, and wait until after stirring. Add clean water and then put it into a clean container and seal it, waiting for fermentation. The next step is to wait. If everything goes well, you will be able to smell the wine after a week, filter and distill after a month, and the brewing will be successful. Olaf personally participated in the first time, and then just like yesterday, let go of the responsibility to the Vikings and slaves under him, while he was on the side to guide and supervise. If you read the process of making maltose, potato wine, and sweet potato wine, I believe that most people in later generations can learn it. In fact, it is very simple, just a few processes, but it is a bit mysterious and complicated for people in this world because most of the Vikings have some knowledge about wine and a little culture at the same time. Olaf can quickly get started with his instructions, but for the indigenous slaves, winemaking or sugar making is a completely unfamiliar field. They have never heard of it, let alone learned how to make it. Therefore, Olaf did not expect the indigenous slaves to learn. In order to make better use of manpower, Olaf adopted the assembly line production model of a modern factory. Let the most clumsy native slaves clean and process potatoes and sweet potatoes, then cook them in a pot, and leave the rest to the Vikings. The sugar-making process is also the same. The indigenous slaves are responsible for washing and processing, then chopped up and grind when grinding. There must be Viking guidance. After filtering, the indigenous slaves will add firewood to transport the firewood. The Vikings are responsible for controlling the temperature and timing of adding the malt, then mixing and finalizing the shape. Olaf wiped his hands with a linen cloth, then took out the charcoal pen and notebook from his arms, found a wine industry on the page of the industry catalog written in simplified Chinese characters, and then carefully wrote potato wine and sweet potato wine from the back of the wine. Words. This page is full of dense Chinese characters. www.wuxiaspitcom industry is the cornerstone of Vinland. Ceramic industry, bone china, pottery, expensive value, technology needs to be improved, potential 5 stars, for industry animal skins such as skins, expensive, temporarily unable to catch and breed, unsustainable industry, potential 2 stars, sugar industry, maple syrup, malt sugar, high value, technology needs to be perfected, potential 5 stars, mining, gold mines, iron ore mines, copper mines, coal mines, the value is immeasurable. The technical equipment is primitive and simple, the development cycle is very long, and the potential is 5 stars. Winemaking industry, wine, potato wine, sweet potato wine, high value. Technology needs to be improved, 5 stars for development potential. All written on this page is Olaf's plan for Vinland's industry, among which ceramic industry, fur industry, sugar industry and wine industry have entered the development track. The mining industry is still at the exploratory stage. However, Yacht has been responsible for the overall planning of wine in the winemaking industry for the past 2 years. Every summer, he ordered manual slaves to pick grapes. Of course, he also expanded the scale on the basis of heir vineyards and eventually planted more than 10 acres of grapes. Then most of the grapes are processed to make wine. A small amount is eaten at the time and dried into raisins. Although grape planting and wine development are still very primitive in Vinland, they have taken shape since last year. As long as the varieties are continuously improved and planting is expanded, the wine industry will grow bigger and bigger in the future. As long as the production of potato wine and sweet potato wine is developed this year, the production in one winter can exceed the production of wine in the whole island of Vinland, and then it will be shipped to Europe next year for a good price. Chapter 134, Industrial Prosperity. The time soon entered October. The weather in Vinland dropped sharply with 2 early winter light rains, and everyone had to wrap themselves in leather jackets when they went out. Olaf has been paying attention to the production of maltose and potato wine by the 2 Adam workers these days, traveling to and from the factory and workshop every day, and at the same time inspecting the food produced that day. By mid-October, the weather is getting colder and colder. Although it is not close to zero, many trees have already fallen leaves. Up to now, Olaf's 2 Adams have produced nearly 50,000 pounds of maltose and more than 100,000 gallons of potato wine and sweet potato wine, consuming more than 300,000 pounds of potatoes and sweet potatoes. The lees has not been filtered out, but the residues after making starch were taken away by the slaves, who might be preparing to take them home to cook and eat. In this experimental production, everything was not going well. A few days ago, due to the improper operation of the workers, the 7 cylinders of sweet potato wine were broken. Olaf found out that he had let them go after only verbal punishment. After all, he had to allow his subordinates for the first time. They made mistakes, and their work efficiency was much better afterwards. Olaf estimated according to this schedule. Except for the coldest winter season, where production is not possible, he can still work for more than 20 days next month, and then next spring will begin. It should be able to consume 700,800,000 pounds of potatoes and sweet potatoes before April next year, and naturally produce 130,000 to 40 million pounds of maltose and 500,000 gallons of potato wine and sweet potato wine. In addition to producing such a huge amount of maltose, potato wine, and sweet potato wine, there will be 2 to 3 million pounds of residue, distillers' grains, etc., which will be used in the breeding industry next spring. At present, Vinland does not promote the breeding industry. It is still the grazing of cattle, sheep, horses, etc., and the reindeer brought and purchased by the Icelanders. It belongs to extensive free-range breeding. Although the management cost is very low, the reproduction rate is low and the growth cycle is long, is not considered an advanced breeding technique. In addition to grazing and individual captive breeding, the Vikings in Herat City would also raise some chickens, ducks and poultry in their yards, so that they could eat eggs. Some wealthy individuals also raised a few sheep or pigs. It is the development model of the small peasant economy in the current era. Olaf believes that with the popularization of high-yield crops such as potatoes, corn, sweet potatoes, and pumpkins, Vinland's grain reserves will increase in the future. In the future, wine and sugar workshops will be unable to work except for the coldest 2 months. Production is discontinued and will continue to operate at other times in that year. There will be more than 9 or 10 months that can guarantee the production of wine, sugar and food residues. As a consumable commodity, the more the better. A large amount of food residues can be used to develop breeding feed, encourage Vikings to expand the variety and scale of family breeding, and even build several large pig farms, cattle farms, sheep farms, and breeding farms in a corner of the city of Herat. Racecourse, reindeer farm, etc. Fresh feed cannot be eaten but can be dried in the sun for storage, and then to deal with the winter consumption. The manure produced by farms and household free-range and captive animals can also be used to make manure, and then ensure the fertility of the arable land and increase the yield. A virtuous circle. Vinland's output of grain, meat, and leather goods will increase, and its reserves will also greatly increase. It has the foundation and ability to deal with epidemics, wars, natural disasters and other difficulties. It is the foundation for strengthening its strength and moving toward the founding of a nation. Agriculture determines whether a person's stomach can be filled, and whether a stomach is full or not determines the most basic future of the country and its people. Olaf believes that as long as the rapid development of Vinland's agriculture and the efficient development of farming and breeding can be ensured, the population of Vikings will increase exponentially in 10 or 20 years. The core Icelandic Vikings and by-Vikings in the future will only need enough. Many, the natives who rule tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands, rule the vast territory of North America, is also a matter of course in terms of IQ ability. Olaf is not top-notch among Vikings in Vinland, but Hader, Hudik, Iat, Hoskard, Heine and others are all limited by the insight and knowledge level of the backward era. Colonial rule has no good planning and development direction like other colonists in the 17th century. England, France, Denmark, the Netherlands and other countries had a very backward colonial rule in Europe in the 17th century. People like Olaf who carried out industrial planning and development guidance for Vinland resources hardly existed. This is a question of consciousness and also has the role of leading knowledge after all. Olaf had also seen the vigorous battle against poverty that his elders were engaged in for 6 years. In the past few years, under the strong leadership of the organization, there has been a wave of planning industries across the country, and while getting rid of poverty and becoming rich improved the village-level collective economy so, in the final analysis, it is just one sentence. Industry is the foundation of making a fortune and making a country strong. The Opium War in the late Qing dynasty was essentially caused by the competition between Western and Eastern industries. The most fundamental way to plunder the wealth of other countries was to dump products, purchase your raw materials and process them, and then dump them at you. People from other countries. Olaf knows very well that since the beginning of the colonial mode in the Great Nautical Era, any country that opened its eyes to the world has entered the accelerated mode, plundering wealth through colonial rule to increase national power. So the defeat of the Qing dynasty to the great powers in later generations is not limited to other people's European homeland. At that time, the British Empire had a colony of 20 million square kilometers, and France also had 6 to 7 million square kilometers of land, and they had been operating for many years, only developing basic industries to provide raw materials and cheap labor for the European headquarters. Olaf has in his mind the advanced experience of colonial rule and governance for hundreds of years in later generations. So he can propose that Hader and others are convinced and willing to obey the opinions. From a certain perspective, Olaf is like a prophet in ancient books, guiding Vinland from a small and weak colony to slowly develop and grow, and embark on the road of rapid development as a powerful country. After the weather dropped significantly, Heine ordered people to dig larger and more cellars in the city on Olaf's suggestion to store sweet potatoes, and pumpkins for the winter. Corn, wheat and other grains were dried in the sun last month, and then the fullest seeds were selected from them, and the remaining part was transported to the windmill workshop to be ground into flour. And the rest was bagged and put into the warehouse. The windmill workshop has not stopped using it after Hader distributes the grain. www.uxiaspit.com. Every day, Vikings and white slaves use windmills to grind flour, corn flour, etc. This is free use, and it is used by Europeans. Very rare benefits in the concept at present. Vinland has a small population and a single development model, resulting in a weak business atmosphere since Hader adopted military rule. Resources can be completely controlled in his hands, so basically the Vikings, as the ruling class, are allocated free of charge for their basic living needs. But according to the plans of Hader, Olaf and others, Vinland will be reformed from next year as Vinland's population increases in the future. After land is allocated to individuals, it is still necessary to return to the business model and implement a formal path of the tax system in the future. Vinland will still collect agricultural taxes based on land, commercial taxes based on commercial activities, and wool tax for development of breeding. Only through reasonable taxation can we promote the free releasability of Vikings and white slaves and develop industries. After the implementation of the tax system in the future, the Vikings and the white slaves will have to determine a clear recruitment system, and determine the Vikings to perform military service, and the white slaves to perform militia and military service. This is the most fundamental system for Vinland's future development. As for the indigenous slaves, the private property of those masters cannot be included in the protection of laws and regulations at all. As long as the indigenous slaves are required for servitude in war, they must be expropriated. Make corresponding compensation. These reform methods were all written on paper and placed on the bedside of Hader. He studied day and night and discussed and perfected them with Olaf, Heine and others, and gradually formed a governance model suitable for Vinland's national conditions. Chapter 135, Meetings and Rifts. On October 20th, Hader convened a meeting of the propeller head, production team leader and other management in the conference hall. This meeting was to understand the recent production and life situation and grasp the exposed problems and solve them. General Adon, have been responsible for leading the slaves to build the road from the city of Heir to the port. Things are going well, but the wooden carts are seriously damaged. Master Olaf's factory needs to produce more carts. Yiluji, as the head of the oar, got up and said the problem after several other elders had finished talking about their work. Hader, Olaf, and Olaf were all listening and writing with a pen on the paper in front of them. After Yiluki finished speaking, Olaf looked up and said, "How much do you need? There are 3 carriages in the warehouse that were made before. You can use it first. We will continue production tomorrow, and we must not delay our road construction in the city of Grote. If you want to get rich, build roads first." This is the slogan Olaf put forward in the 1990s when he was a child. Convenient transportation can promote the development of commerce and increase the population. The capitals of European countries are basically built near deep water ports. The 8 rivers in the Tang dynasty circled Chang'an, the Bayan River and the Grand Canal in the Song dynasty. Nanjing and Daming relied on the Yangtze River, and Beijing relied on Tianjinwei and Beijing-Hangzhou water transport. To say that convenient transportation means productivity and control over the country. Since the completion of the city of Heir this spring and the end of spring plowing, every week, a Viking from Aden led 1,000 slaves to renovate the outer city and even the road to the stronghold and fortress under the city to take care of the world. First use tools to cut down trees, remove weeds and shrubs, then level the land, and finally use gravel and other materials to pave the road. The landform of Winland is hills and cliffs. The elevation is obvious. There are many puddles and lakes, but because of the cold climate, there are few weeds and low shrubs. It will not be too troublesome for the Viking army to go on the road. It's easier to deal with in less than half a year. The roads inside and outside the city of Grote have been paved with gravel. Currently, half of the road leading to the southern port has been built. According to the plan, repairs should be completed before the roads are closed due to heavy snow this year. The latest road construction was Yiluji, and he raised the issue that Hader and Olaf must be resolved as soon as possible, so as not to delay the completion of the last batch of siege this year. After Yiluji finished speaking, several other paddleheads and production team leaders also got up and talked about other aspects of production and life. For example, when collecting food such as berries, grapes, hazelnuts, and pine nuts, the indigenous slaves stole them. Before Hader spoke, Hagrid slapped the table and yelled at him, and then demanded that the overseer be given the right to discipline the slave workers on the spot. Hader nodded in agreement, and Hannah also said, "The rations have just been distributed this year, plus the rewards and gifts after work. It is never a problem for the slaves to eat. Slaves who steal must be severely punished, and they will be given a whip if they find one. Punishment. Even punishing them to go to the quarry for half a year." In this meeting, most people spoke, and the problems exposed soon were resolved. Heine got up and looked at the crowd. Just as he was about to announce the end of the meeting, Olaf suddenly remembered his newly promoted production captain Gilson. This is a young and loyal Inuit who was chosen by Piku before he left Wenland. He was given to Olaf as the production captain who managed the city's participating Inuit. Gilson had always been taciturn, but he was serious and responsible. Later, as the Vikings and indigenous slaves continued to go to various places on the island to hunt and bring back dozens of Inuit, Hader gave Olaf a slave. Ralph also asked Gilson to manage these people because of his busy schedule recently. Olaf didn't bother much about the affairs of his 2 Adens. They were usually managed by 4 Viking captains, and one of whose slaves at Aden was supervised by the production captain Gilson. A few days ago, Gilson told Olaf that many slaves had been sick recently, and even several people in the city had died of illness. Although slaves die every year, even white slaves and Vikings also get sick and die. The only difference is the number. Leaders such as Hader have not cared about it. Olaf takes this issue very seriously. The population of Herat city is increasing, and many diseases are infectious. If there are diseases, you have to pay attention. Olaf got up and emphasized the need to continue to promote masks this winter, so that everyone should wear masks to avoid spreading diseases, and at the same time quarantine people who are sick in order to save their lives. Even though Olaf did not understand Chinese medicine, he allocated hundreds of pounds of medicinal materials such as radix satidus and honeysuckle in the warehouse, so that they could be boiled into soup for patients to take, and other people in the city could receive it every day. A cup of potion for prevention for Wenland, who has only more than 10,000 people. Population is the cornerstone of everything. Olaf had to do his best to protect Vikings, contracted white slaves and even indigenous slaves. Only with more and more people can Wenland grow more and more. Come stronger and richer. Olaf's generosity made everyone full of praise for his kind deeds, and Hader even patted Olaf on the shoulder and said, "Our family can become the Lord of Vinland." Olaf has half of his achievements. He is her pride. Although Olaf has the soul of an adult, he is still a little triumphant and happy to be praised by others, but everyone does not care. But the eldest son Olaf sitting on the other side of Hader's face is a bit stiff. Olaf and Olaf have a deep relationship, just like Hader and Hagrid of their fathers, but Olaf is 22 years old. www.wooxiaspit.com. He has inherited a bold character inherited from the family, but as the eldest son and one of the founders of the Vinland colony, he is now covered by his father and younger brother Olaf. A little light. This made Olaf's mood a little depressed. Traditional Icelanders have never conspired and have the courage to face everything directly. After the meeting, Olaf found his father Hader, told him his troubles directly, and then asked to leave the city of Herut to stand on his own. "Dad, I am 22 years old, and I will be 23 years old after this winter. You have been sailing out to rob and do business when you were my age. But I still live in the shadow of you and my brother. I think I can represent the Herut family to conquer the indigenous people and open up land on the other side of the continent." Seeing that his father hadn't expressed his opinion, Olaf continued to request. Hader had actually approved Olaf's request in his heart, but he was worried that the departure of the eldest son would affect Olaf's relationship and feelings with him, so he kept silent at this time. Olaf also approached and found his father and elder brother, and even heard Ulf's request. As soon as Olaf's thoughts turned, he understood why his eldest brother had to set up another door. He saw that his father's preference for himself and his glory were too great, and he didn't want to stay in Herut City to compete with his younger brother, so he went to develop it himself. World at the same time, Olaf wanted to rely on his own hard work to achieve results and have his own team strength, in order to become a force that Vinland cannot ignore in the future, so Hader had to pass this position to him. Olaf even thought with a black belly, maybe by then Olaf would not be afraid of fighting by himself. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136, Set Up Another Door. The tradition of the Vikings is that the eldest son inherits the family business, and the second and third sons have to stand on their own. However, the father or the elder brother who inherits the family business should help them get married and start a business, that is, they spend money to help them marry a wife and give them a boat. They go to rob and do business, so that they have fulfilled their duties. However, this situation is not static. For the eldest son who is disabled or ill, or the second son is very capable, the second son will inherit the family property, and then they will support the elder brother, or help the elder brother's children get married and start a career later. The Vikings had a fixed life in Iceland and turned into agricultural Icelanders. Their beliefs have also changed, but the rules for inheritance of family heritage and the inheritance of the position of the head of the family have not changed. Olaf is now actively asking for another establishment. In fact, he expressed his unwillingness to compete with his younger brother Olaf for the right of inheritance, and his intention to cede the existing family property to Olaf. Then he himself now uses his father's support to open up a vast new world. The territory and resources of Olaf reflect Olaf's emphasis on family affection and his confidence in his own abilities, but most of them are young and ambitious. Olaf's desire for the vast continent at the same time. The deepest thing is that Olaf discovered that he can only inherit his father's position in the future only by cultivating his subordinates, because the current performance shows that his father is interested in Olaf, and at the same time he has no land and manpower in his hands. The future I definitely can compete with my dear second brother. If Olaf is supported by his father and backed by Vinland's resource population, then he will be able to lay down the new world while his father is still alive. He belongs to the family in name but actually belongs to his own kingdom, just like the Kingdom of Scotland and Wales. The status of the Duchy to the Kingdom of England in the future, he will also have the strength to compete for the position of the Patriarch 10,000 steps back, even if they can compete, as long as Olaf's heirs are endless. His own territory can be inherited and ruled by his descendants in the future, but nominally he must obey his father Hader and future family heirs, and belong to the entire Hader. Part of the family territory. Olaf doesn't value reputation very much. What he cares about is his own power. What he cares about is the land 10 or even 100 times as much as Winland in the west of Winland. If he can take the opportunity to have this reason to conquer and occupy his own land, that's absolutely is currently the best choice. Olaf saw ambition and high spirits in Olaf's eyes and face, and guessed what his brother was thinking, So he stepped forward to help his brother persuade his father. Dad, brother, I think we should be a member of our own family in the mainland who is leading and responsible for conquering the indigenous people. My brother is not young anymore. It seems that Olaf's attitude impressed Hader. He nodded and said, Olaf, you really want to go? Then, follow the food delivery ship to the Basque city in a few days. You and Hudic will replace it and manage it on behalf of our family. Good Labrador. The territories you laid down will be handed over to you in the future. If you have any requirements, you can just mention it. Hearing Hader's statement, Olaf laughed and Olaf felt relieved, and then the father and son walked home with a smile. Icelanders are influenced by their ancestors and respect their promises. They are not polite to refuse what they deserve. They generally don't fight for what they shouldn't get. Although they have always valued land and family property, they pay more attention to their own efforts. Therefore, those who are in difficulties and their relatives and friends defected, they would give away land and wealth to settle them, and it was rare for brothers to compete for a family wealth. Now Olaf took the initiative to set up another door, and Hader, who had long been willing to pass Vinland to Olaf, was relieved. Olaf looked at his brother with admiration, thinking that he had realized that he wanted to fight for the position of patriarch in the future. There are other reasons. Taking advantage of the present opportunity to master at power and land, and have the opportunity to increase power and expand the land, it is a very necessary thing. Olaf was originally unwilling to compete with his brother, thinking that he would be older and go out to establish another business in a few years. Now Olaf has this idea to make Olaf more convinced and wary of his brother. After all, Vinland is only 10,000 square kilometers. The American continent has tens of millions of square kilometers. It is better to start your own creation than to fight. Olaf's heart and courage determine that he is also an outstanding person. Olaf has rich colonial experience and is in his early 20s. He is in the best state of hard work, energy and physical strength. He is willing to take the initiative to expand the territory for the family. That is a good candidate. When he returned home, Hader told the news that Olaf was going to the other continent. Both Catelyn and Gaelny were very worried and reluctant to leave, but Haft was very excited and clamored to go together. Katrin knows very well that the descendants of the Vikings must dare to fight hard and cook without speaking. Olaf and Olaf held their younger brother Half and told him that he could only go out to fight when he became an adult. Half, who was almost 9 years old, picked up his weapon, a throwing axe that hadn't been sharpened, and yelled that he was an adult. Olaf was annoyed when he heard it, and hit his brother 3 meters away with a fist. The axe clinked to the ground, and Half got up and sat aside. Honestly, Olaf and Jelny chuckled. In this family, Olaf has been very mature and intelligent since he was a child, so he has always been very special. But Half is an energetic picking bag. Generally, only Olaf and Hader 3 iron fists can make Half quiet. It is also from the age of 4 or 5 that Olaf beats him all day. This naughty brother made Half so obedient in front of Olaf, but Olaf, who left Iceland before Half was born, has rarely seen his 2 younger siblings for many years. When he was reunited in Vinland, he cherished family affection and cared for his younger siblings. Therefore, Half did not. The eldest brother, who was afraid of himself, didn't get honest until he got a punch. Today the barren land and the severe cold environment have created a habit of treating people warmly and attaching importance to family and friendship. But also because there are not too many ways of pastime, Icelandic children, regardless of their relatives, love to listen to elders explaining saga poems and poems. Ancient mythology. At the same time, it's also because of the admiration of the ancestors' bravery. When every Icelander was young, he was either fighting or on the way to fight. So it is not clear whether it is the genetic inheritance of the ancestors or the influence of the human environment that made Icelanders combative character and strong physique. After a while, Katrin and a young Inuit girl slave came in with food, and the family sat down to eat. Vikings do not have the habit of eating and not talking. Hader told some stories about when he was just an adult and then went out on a boat to looting, and at the same time tried to make Olaf work hard. After talking, Olaf asked, "Father, I heard that you have arranged ships to go to Basque City and Plymouth City and Nuuk, Greenland to deliver food. The seas of Greenland will freeze in winter. Can you make it?" Hader swallowed the sausage in his mouth and said, "Tomorrow, Valutu, Shilt, and Salrak will sail. Greenland's sea closure should be next month. No accident, everything is in time." Olaf misses Piqua a little, because he has always regarded Piqua as a friend. As usual, Vinland will cool down at the end of next month or even in the middle of next month. By that time, he will not be able to go out for 2 months. Olaf also wants to travel to Greenland before being locked up at home www.wooksyaspit.com and can be with Piku. Talk about it, look at what he saw and heard, and understand the real situation of colonizing Greenland. In case Piku encounters any difficulties in colonizing Greenland, he can help him solve it face to face. After all, the captain who transported the supplies had no friendship with Piku, and he might not be willing to solve Piku's difficulties. Dad, I want to go to Greenland on the boat tomorrow. Olaf looked at his father and said his thoughts. Katrin frowned, but Hader nodded and said, okay. Bring more hands and guns, so you can protect yourself in case of danger. Icelanders treat adult children as they let them work hard. If they can earn a family property outside the manor, all the property that their parents die in the future will eventually be discounted and then fall into the hands of the children. Therefore, now Icelanders treat wealth to the children. In many aspects, such as going out and fighting, the views are very similar to those of the ancient Vikings. Although Olaf is not biologically adult, his height and body shape is no less than that of an adult Icelandic, even taller than many short adults. If he is taller than a native slave, he can surpass Olaf until there are few. Olaf's height, physical strength and mentality are about the same as adults, even more than most indigenous slaves and ordinary white-skinned adults. Hader has always respected Olaf's ideas, and he thought about his request to go to Greenland. After a while, I naturally agreed. Katlin's frown is not like a mother in the Far East who is reluctant to bear children. She just feels that there is nothing to see in a barren and cold place like Greenland, but since her husband agreed, Olaf has always had ideas, and she will not persuade her husband. When I changed my mind with my son, I acquiesced in it. Chapter 137, Changes in Greenland. The geographical location of Greenland determines that it does not have the 4 distinct seasons of the southern countries. To be precise, Greenland has only extremely cold winters and not particularly cold winters. At the beginning of the winter, in the sense of the month, Greenland had a heavy snowfall, which completely thickened the ice of the lakes and lakes on the island, and the snow-capped mountains on the island seem to have become bigger. Although the coast of Nuuk and other port areas has not yet frozen, as the weather gets colder and colder, the sea around Greenland will soon freeze. The weather in Greenland today seems to be better. The daylight hours are a little longer. Even though the daylight hours are getting shorter and shorter, the sun in the sky can still be seen at noon under the sunlight. More than 20 canoes appeared in the Strait of Nuuk. These boats were made by the people of Piku using wood brought from wetland in the spring. They went out to hunt whales and fight. A weapon for fishing and conquering the quartet. Because the Inuit people living in Greenland are located in the warmer southern coast, they can only row a boat if they want to find them. Soon more than 20 large ships arrived at a newly built small port on the shore, and then 4 people alighted on each canoe, each with a lot of animal skins on their backs. After a while, 100 people gathered on the shore. 7 people alighted on the largest wooden boat headed by, and the strong bearded man in the middle was the governor of Greenland, Piku leader. This time we conquered the 5 large tribes of the southwest fjord, and other small tribes also surrendered to us, offering fur as a tribute. You have led us all to conquer the entire west coast. An equally burly short man also has a beard, but his beard is yellow, which looks completely different from Piku, and his voice is lower. He bends over to Pikush and said with a smile. Piku is very happy to hear, and then laughed. We can conquer the west coast by the bravery of everyone and the White Wolf soldiers, as well as the advanced weapons bestowed by the master. I just thought about it in my heart and conquered us in the southwest strait. I became the master of the west coast and controlled tens of thousands of Inuit, and now my governor of Greenland is worthy of the master. Originally from Piku and others who occupied Nuuk in the spring, they wiped out the surrounding tribes and moved all the surrounding Inuit to Nuuk to live together. More than 100 Inuit Vikings and more than 400 White Wolf soldiers plus more than 300 Inuit slaves who were enslaved have established a camp village of nearly 1,000 people. Because the wood and food they brought were enough, the Nuuk colony went smoothly in the beginning, and there was no phenomenon of freezing and starvation after Piku sent people to make wood into canoes. The Inuit Vikings led the Inuit slaves to start fishing every day. With the warmer weather, the active fish and stockpiles gradually made the camp's food consumption approaching a balance. Piku waited until everyone had adapted to the environment, and finally a dozen White Wolf soldiers who had been dissatisfied with the water and soil returned to normal before deciding to continue conquering the surrounding tribes with advanced weapons and strong forces. Piku's army can always easily defeat the rebelling tribe, then kill the leader, and move other people in the tribe to the area close to Nuuk, which is easy to manage. It also ensures that the newly conquered tribe can have enough areas for food. Although living for a period of time, In order to ensure that there is no shortage of supplies, the population must be dispersed and migrated according to the migration of fish, seals, reindeer and other animals to chase and feed the Inuit animals, but there is no problem with this arrangement. Within 2 or 3 months, after entering the warmest summer and the longest polar day, Pikku's army entered the peak of the War of Conquest, conquering 1 or 2 tribes every day in more than 2 months. Pikku broke through more than 70 big tribes and conquered nearly 300 tribes, so that later tribes all heard of Pikku's reputation and directly met his fleet. Surrendered, and then offered tribute such as fur and walrus tusks. Pikku knew that his current human resources could not learn from the master's enslavement of the Woodland indigenous people, and he also captured all the Inuit in Nuuk for unified management. The first is that there are too few people in his own hands, and the more important reason is that the environment in Greenland is harsh and resources are scarce. Nuuk can't feed too many people at all. 1 or 2,000 people are currently the limit. After the fall, Pikku conquered most of the tribes on the west coast. At that time, the territory occupied most of the west coast. There were more than 300 large and small tribes, with a population of more than 9,000, but there are still some tribes in the southwest strait who refuse to surrender and pay tribute, and the 5 largest tribes have formed an alliance against themselves. Pikku didn't want to head on to cause losses to himself, so he took advantage of the critical stalls where various tribes were frantically fishing and hunting, accumulating food for the winter, and led 100 elite to attack the tribal alliance in the southwest strait. Those tribes never thought that Pikku would attack, and they had no strength to resist. At the moment of contact, Pikku led his people to kill more than a dozen hunters, and then all the tribes quickly surrendered. If you don't kneel fast, you can't do it, because the hunters who hit the tribe will die disastrously, resulting in insufficient food before the winter, and ultimately the whole tribe will not survive. It doesn't matter if you surrender, it's king to live. Taking advantage of the military operations and deterrence before the winter, Pikku surrendered 5 tribes in the southwest strait and more than a dozen small tribes around it in one fell swoop. Pikku has also completely controlled the entire west coast, becoming the owner of Greenland's most populous and climate-best west coast, controlling tens of thousands of people, and this population has accounted for 40% or even half of the entire Greenland. Returned to the new colony, and the guards at the camp stepped forward to greet him, and helped more than 100 White Wolf soldiers and Inuit warriors to carry leather goods and meat. There are currently more than 120 longhouses in Nuuk's camp, with a total of 2,000 people living, including more than 100 Vikings, more than 400 White Wolf soldiers, and 1,500 Inuit slaves. The stone materials used to build the longhouse are all locally sourced. Half of the wood is the logs brought by Woodland and leftover wood from shipbuilding, and the remaining half is the low birch and polar willow trees felled in the surrounding area. Although the vegetation of Greenland is covered very few, but the area of the island is really too big, and the wood resources are actually quite a lot. Reading www.uucanchu.com is just inconvenient to call. Pikku ordered everyone to go home for dinner, and then walked into his longhouse. An Inuit girl with a sturdy body and a beautiful face came out of the back room with the gold jewelry that Pikku had given her, wearing a beautiful seal leather jacket, first bowed politely, and then fetched a warm water bag inside. It was filled with reindeer milk and was kept warm in front of the fire kang, in order to feed Pikku. This girl is the daughter of a chief of the big tribe. After being photographed by Pikku, she will come over and become his woman. No chief is considered to be in the light of Pikku. She has not been executed, but is reduced to a slave. Now she follows 3 times a day. A white Viking domesticated reindeer and studied how to expand the scale of herding. It was a free job. Pikku took a few sips from the water bag, then wiped his mouth and said, "Helman, the reindeer milk you boiled is delicious." Helman smiled, walked to Pikku and stretched out his hand to squeeze his shoulders, and said, "You men go out and fight, and under the blessing of God, you are fighting against the sea and the beasts for food. I can't help you. I can only take care of you." Pikku snorted comfortably, then reached out and grabbed Helman's warm and tender little hand, gently pulled his arms around his soft body, and smiled. "You have been with me for 2 months. Why are you not pregnant yet? Helman is a girl after all," and he whispered a little shyly. I don't know." Pikku picked up her petite body and walked towards the back room, and smiled as he walked. "I'll let you know. Yet, haven't eaten yet, eat more." Activities. Chapter 138, The Governor and Number 039's Happy Life. In the blink of an eye, the next morning, Pikku, who was tired in the middle of the night, lay on the fur cushion in the back room and fell asleep. But Helman had dressed up and picked up a few dried reindeer dung cakes in front of the fire kang on the side. Reignite and throw it in to see the traces in the kang. The flame is extinguished at night. When the kang heated up, Helman found a piece of whale meat that was rich in grease and pierced it with ivory, then put it into the fire to burn it. After half a day, it was roasted half-baked, and the skin turned black before taking it out. He made it with whale teeth. The knife scraped off the black material on the surface of the barbecue, revealing the yellow and dry flesh inside. This is today's breakfast. After a while, Piku got up, and then ate barbecue with Helman and drank a glass of reindeer milk. As the governor of Western Greenland, he could guarantee 3 daily meals and eat meat every time. Piku put on a Shanghai leopard skin jacket under Helman's weight, then put on a hat made of Arctic rabbit skin, took the big axe and walked out of the room. Not long after going out, Piku turned back and looked at his woman and said, "Helman, go and treat the 2 seals captured yesterday. It's almost night, and you also make a warm new suit." Helman was very happy, kissed Piku, and happily went to the outhouse to deal with the seal carcass left last night. Piku hummed and walked out, and said in his heart, "A woman is just like a dog. There are delicious foods. If you treat her better, you can die. I heard that the women of a big tribal chief on the east coast are very beautiful. Take a look next year." Stepping on the yellow and frozen turf under his feet, Piku glanced at the dozens of reindeer and the yellow pasture outside New Colony. The 3 white Vikings had already risen and were ordering the slaves on the ranch to milk. "Good morning, Piku." "Good morning, Bell." "Bruton." "Howling. How is the forage preparation for the winter?" The Vikings from Irish white slaves saw Piku and greeted him enthusiastically. Some time ago Piku gave them a beautiful young Inuit girl, making them lonely and bored. Greenland is also having a bit of fun, and their relationship has become more and more harmonious recently. Halen, the oldest of the 3, shook hands with Piku cordially, and then said, "This year we have 2 few domesticated deer herds. Forage grass is easy to find. It's not a big problem." The 4 went siping in Icelandic for a while, and suddenly a tall and strong yellow-skinned man walked in a white wolf leather suit. At this time, the sky had just lighted up, and all 4 of them recognized that the man was a commander of the White Wolf Soldier. His name was Nunan. He was very brave. He took the lead in every battle and took the lead in beheading the opponent's warrior. More than 400 White Wolf soldiers are the basis for Piku to rule and conquer Greenland, so Piku is very kind to the bosses and even soldiers, and at the same time guarantees their food. But in order to prevent the White Wolf soldiers from disobeying discipline, Piku, the 400 White Wolf soldiers were also divided into 2 teams to check and balance each other, with 200 people in each team, and Nunan was "You always guard my White Wolf guard. Why are you here?" "What's the matter?" Piku and Nunan hugged cordially. And then asked. Nunan said in a somewhat blunt Icelandic language, "My lord, the Inuit militias and slaves who went fishing just now found a huge ship entering the due west strait, coming towards Nuuk. Where's the boat? Have someone watch it." Piku asked vigilantly. "I have sent the White Wolf soldiers to see. The ship coming at this time should have been sent by the Master of the Gods to deliver food." Nunan said in a deep voice, "I think so, but it may also be a Danish colonist. I heard from my master that the King of Denmark also established a Greenland company and wanted to develop colonies. Although there has been no movement before, it must be guarded. You should inform Sarakino. Immediately summon the White Wolf soldiers and Inuit militias. We must be prepared for battle, and if it is the Danish colonists, we will drive them away." The 2 of them talked and walked quickly towards the west coast. After Piku ordered Nunan to run to the settlement not far away in a gust of wind, they shouted loudly. The Icelandic language was also mixed with Bedak language, and a few simple enunciated with the shouts of Nunan. The new colony in the early morning suddenly became noisy. Living in the other tallest longhouses near the Piku longhouse, came out more than 50 wearing half-length plate armor, holding long the Inuit Vikings with swords, crossbows and bows and arrows on their backs. This is the young and strong man in the Inuit family of Adin under Piku, and they all became the captains of the militias that ruled Greenland. Outside the longhouse of the Inuit is the room of the White Wolf soldiers, but less than half of the White Wolf soldiers are still in the house at this time. Hearing the leader's call, they all quickly put on wolf skins and wooden armor, and then arrived with swords and bows. Gather outside the door in the low wooden huts on the periphery. More than 200 strongest Inuit slaves came out. They were the strongest and brave warriors selected among the 1,300 slaves. They were the subordinates of the Nuint Vikings. The militia could not be better. The Nuint militia was the first to join the war in the extreme summer. Although the discipline and combat effectiveness were not as good as the White Wolf soldiers, their performance was remarkable. Hearing the movement, Sarakino and other White Wolf soldiers quickly ran back from the colony, and then an armed force of more than 700 people composed of White Wolf soldiers and Inuit militia assembled in less than half an hour, and at the same time, under the leadership of Piku, walked to the dock to stand ready. After a few minutes, several canoes on the coast approached quickly. The White Wolf soldiers and Newington slaves on the boats quickly paddled www.uxiaspit.com so that the speed of the canoes was not affected by the wind and waves, and soon arrived at the shore. Jumping off the boat, a White Wolf soldier shouted with surprise on his face, "The governor! The governor! It's Winland's big ship! It's Winland's big ship coming!" The White Wolf soldier seems to have a bad knowledge of Icelandic, and his excited shout is a mixture of Icelandic and Bedak, but Piku on the shore, the two captains and most of the Vikings understood it. Good. Haha. Hearing Winland's ship carrying supplies, everyone was relieved and sighed and laughed. After a while, everyone on the shore saw two huge ships turning from a promontory on the western sea, and then quickly approached all the way through the waves. When they got closer, they could see clearly that the ship was hung with horns and iron helmets. The design of the grey cloak and the axe is the flag that Hader decided after unifying Winland last year. The design means the grey cloak Jokert family in Viking raid, and it's Winland's material ship. Winland is here. After seeing Piku clearly, he couldn't help but said that in the distance, the white Vikings of 3 breeding experts including Hausen also rushed over. Everyone gathered on the shore and stood still and waited quietly. After half a day, the 2 big ships docked in front of the pier, and then the sailors dropped the ropes, and Piku immediately ordered the people to pick them up and tie them up, and then hand them out. The first to walk down from the 2 ships was Hilter in a wolfskin coat and a tall, familiar figure. Piku saw the 2 change their faces and gave a soft cry of surprise, and then rushed over quickly, as if he had seen the owner's puppy. Chapter 139, The Success of Greenland and Number 039's Colonization. Piku was pleasantly surprised when Olaf appeared, and quickly greeted him, and then reached out his hand to support Olaf. Piku said with red eyes, "Master, why did you come here yourself?" Olaf patted Piku, who was half a head shorter than himself but a sturdy circle. He felt that the muscles under the leather jacket were tough, and they were much stronger than in summer. So he smiled and said, "It looks like you are this year. Life in Greenland was pretty good, haha." Piccolo laughed, then patted his stomach and said, "I have meat every day, and now there are women. Life is good, but I still miss the days of following your master in Winland." Olaf laughed and said, "Haha, do it well, it will have more uses in the future. This time I am here to see how your colonial business is doing, and tell me if you have any difficulties. I will help you find a way." Pikiku said, "Okay. Master, let's go to the room to talk, it's a bit cold outside. You should drink a cup of hot deer milk to warm up your body first." Olaf did not speak but looked at the hundreds of people behind Piku, all holding weapons, and frowned. "What are you doing? I heard someone report that there was a big ship coming. I was worried that the colonists of the Danish Greenland Company called the militia and the White Wolf soldiers to fight them away." Pikiku's face blushed, and he turned around to disperse the crowd. Olaf and Hilter laughed, and Hilter said, "This time we have shipped 100,000 pounds of potatoes and sweet potatoes, as well as some wheat, corn and pumpkins. Master Olaf brought you some wine and potatoes." "Wine? Don't you want to send someone to move down?" Piku swiftly turned around and ordered his men to get on the ship, and then watched Olaf's interest in the 2 White Wolf guards behind him and the leader of the Inuit militia, so he introduced them. After Olaf gave a few words of encouragement, Piku led Olaf and Hilt to his longhouse, and the other sailors and Vikings who came with the ship were arranged to other Inuit. It's in the longhouse of Beijing. People entering the warm room, Piku naturally helped Olaf take off his coat, and then shouted in Inuktitut, "Helman, come and see the master." A beautiful girl came out and looked at Olaf curiously, with a trace of fear flashing in her eyes. It was the first time she saw such a tall, white-skinned and yellow-haired person. Although Piku had said before, she was still a little frightened. "Want to gaze? Pour the deer milk for the master." Piku frowned and reprimanded. Helman woke up and hurriedly bowed to salute, and then went to pour 3 cups of milk and put it in a tub in front of Olaf, Schilt and Piku. The 3 Piku sat down on the stone bench covered with animal fur, and then took the cup. Olafo looked at Helman twice, then smiled and said, "Piku, this is your woman? Not bad." The host. Chapter 140, Tap into Greenland and Number 039's Potential. Olaf's plan to colonize Greenland was originally intended to be a place where commodities such as fur, walrus tusks, whale oil, dried meat, dried fish, etc. are cherished. Piku may have understood the owner's meaning, or he may make his own decision. In short, he decided let the Inuit people who submit in various places pay tribute, which also guarantees the output of Greenland. Although the Inuit people everywhere will work harder and even more dangerous than in the past, but for Piku and Olaf, he doesn't feel pity. To be precise, Piku doesn't have any thoughts of pity, but Olaf doesn't think about what he brought to the people of Greenland after he got a large number of fur goods and specialties. For Olaf and Piku, doing so is politically correct, and it is also a correct choice of interests, which can reduce unnecessary expenditure and waste if you have to establish a city-state in Greenland and concentrate the population. First of all, the current production and living conditions are insufficient to develop the resources of Greenland, which cannot support a large number of people living in concentrated lives, and secondly, it will affect the Inuit people's development of the vast land resources of the sea. Only by decentralizing and operating independently is the most intensive high-value colonial method now. Moreover, as Nuuk becomes more and more developed in the future, with a large amount of food, linen, handmade products and other commodities supported by Vinland, as well as ironware, weapons, etc., the indigenous Inuit people of Greenland will also be promoted by the help of advanced weapons and hunting equipment. The efficiency of hunting and fishing improves the quality of life. Therefore, Piku's approach was highly praised by Olaf and recognized. Piku was very happy. He drank 2 more glasses that night, and then gave Olaf the warmest bed at night when he went to bed. The east room gave Hild, and he and Helman went to the side room to rest at night. The door creaked, and Olaf, who had taken off his clothes and went to bed, thought it was Piku, and said without looking up, "Don't wait, go out, master. Let me wash your feet." The voice of a girl who spoke harsh Icelandic reached Olaf's ears, causing him to wake up suddenly, and when he looked up, he saw Piku's wife Helman walking in with a pot of hot water. Olaf seemed to be playing a drum in his heart, looking excitedly at the handsome woman in front of him. If Olaf was a thorough Icelander, he wouldn't care, but Olaf's soul did not allow him to enjoy the feet washing service. "You put the basin down and go." Olaf was worried that Helman would not understand him, and said in the Inuktitut language he learned from Piku last year. After all, Helman is a girl who has never seen the world. In her eyes, Olaf is the most noble person in the world. She was stunned when she heard the master's words. She wanted to leave but was afraid that Piku would be angry, and she did not dare to leave. Fortunately, Piku, who has been eavesdropping, hastily walked in, took the water basin from his wife, and snorted coldly, "Get out." After Helman left, Piku smiled and put the basin knife under Olaf's feet and smiled, "Master, don't be angry. I just think Helman's hands can be smooth and soft, making it more comfortable for her to wait for you to fall asleep. Don't you? If you like it, let me come. Don't guess what I think in the future. Get out." Olaf put his foot on Piku's belly. Although he was holding back his strength, it was not light, but Piku's body was strong and it was okay to get a kick, but he just sat down on his and begged for mercy. "Yes, I was wrong. Don't be angry, master." Olaf soaked for a while and lifted his feet out, and was about to reach for the soft leather that served as a rag, but Piku had already grabbed the leather and wiped it with Olaf. After a while, Olaf got into the clean and brand new sealskin quilt, feeling the warmth of the fire underneath him, waved his hand, and said, "Let's go. If you have anything to say tomorrow, master, rest. Call me if you have anything to do." Piku put down a walrus skull that was used as a chamber pot. Olaf is almost 13 years old this year. The hair on his lips is getting thicker and thicker. The voice change ended last year. The Adam's apple has also become obvious. More importantly, the areas where the hair grows have changed. According to the Icelanders with her precocious physique, Olaf now has the ability to make a woman pregnant. Olaf has never thought about men and women. Today, Helman aroused an irritation. Helman's thoughts were endless, and he fell asleep in bed until midnight. The next morning, Olaf got up to wash and found that Helman's breakfast was a black and non-junk barbecue, which made him instantly upset. Helman's meat was boiled with water and salt last night, and the taste was okay, but today the quality of the early barbecue is not good enough. Olaf took only one bite at the invitation of Piku, and then he had a bad appetite and drank 2 cups of reindeer milk after breakfast. Piku accompanied Olaf and Hild for a walk in the new colony. Olaf was to watch the colonial style and the daily life patterns of Vikings, White Wolf soldiers, slaves and others. After looking around, Olaf noticed that most of the people in the colony had left in groups, then searched for the canoes at the dock, and went fishing with harpoons, fishing nets and other tools some people left by boat with bows and weapons. Olaf asked Piku to find out that these people were hunting animals such as muskox, reindeer, wolves, and foxes. Living on the coast. Fishing and hunting is the daily life of Greenlanders. Not relying on fishermen to survive is a problem, although Nuuk is now trying to raise and herd reindeer in captivity, but after all, he is still just beginning to explore. I am afraid that it will not be able to form a scale in a short time. After turning around, Olaf clearly realized that the most fundamental industry in Greenland is fishing and hunting. As long as they send a steady stream of cheap rationed potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, etc. produced by Vinland to fill the stomachs of Greenlanders, they will go to war. Most of the fur and meat obtained after fishing and hunting can be saved to become Vinland's commodities. After turning around all morning, Olaf had a cordial conversation with many people. He also saw the two slaves fighting for a piece of reindeer dung, and then the militia captain took a few mouths. Severely in Greenland, there are few trees, which means that fuel is scarce. In most cases, Inuit people don't light fires, half of their houses are below the ground to keep warm, and the habit of eating raw meat is forced by the environment. But it does not mean that Greenland has no fuel. In addition to a small amount of wood, there is also a common fuel, which is reindeer dung. Although most Inuit people live by fishing and hunting, the big tribes also have a tradition of domesticating reindeer. The dried dung from the path is the best fuel. 100,000 pounds of sweet potatoes, corn, pumpkins and other grains were moved into 3 new tents built with whaleskin last night, and White Wolf soldiers have been guarding them since yesterday. When Olaf found out, he directed Piku to ask people to dig a cellar to store potatoes, sweet potatoes, and pumpkins. At the same time, he told them how to eat these foods and the precautions. www.wuxiaspit.com. The most important thing is that potatoes must not be used. Eat raw and sprouted parts. This is to prevent accidental ingestion. Olaf and Hilt returned to Piku's home at noon today and ate boiled pumpkin, roasted sweet potatoes, and roasted potatoes because the 3 ingredients have a good taste. Everyone is satisfied without seasoning, especially Piku and Helman seem to be reborn as starving ghosts, and one person eats a pot for the first time. Piku and Helman ate sweet potatoes, pumpkins, and potatoes, which taste sweet and soft. After eating the plants with a feeling of fullness, they felt satisfied with their mouths, tongues and stomachs, and the light sweetness made them grow up. Inuits who have never eaten sugar can hardly resist seeing that potatoes, sweet potatoes, and pumpkins, 3 high-yielding, high-nutrient calorie foods, are very popular among the Inuit. Olaf decided to increase grain delivery to Greenland in the future, and must use high-yield potatoes, sweet potatoes, and pumpkins to ensure Greenland. Everyone can eat their fill, and then take away the meat that they have saved in their mouths that would otherwise be eaten. With foods such as potatoes and sweet potatoes, the diet of the Inuit people in Greenland will change in the future, and most of the single meat that must be eaten every day will be replaced by grain if the volume and frequency of transportation are increased according to Olaf's expectations. Piku will be able to trade sweet potatoes, and other food with the Inuit people on both sides of the strait in exchange for their fur and meat as long as the transaction can be maintained. The Inuit people in Greenland will rely on Piku's sales of potatoes and sweet potatoes and the supply of Vinland in a few years. In the future, Piku will control Greenland and it will no longer require force and killing. The sanctions and the right to sell food will make every Inuit obedient. Chapter 141, New Captain. After living in Nuuk for 3 days, Olaf had a clear understanding of the advantages and disadvantages of Greenland, and he felt more at ease about Greenland. He believed that Greenland has great potential, as long as it can provide enough cheap and high-yield rations. Can dig out amazing wealth. 3 days later, Olaf was ready to leave for Wenland, because he might be trapped in Greenland by ice and snow anytime he leaves. Piku said that he had sent some people to set sail with some potatoes and sweet potatoes to trade with other big tribes, and stayed with Olaf for another day. On the 4th day, each fleet returned with a lot of fur and dried meat. Arrived in Nuuk, Pakiku took out tens of thousands of skins from the warehouse. These are the tributes collected by Pakiku to conquer hundreds of thousands of tribes this year, and the fur from the prey that was killed by hunting is equivalent to the entire harvest. Even if it goes well every year, the harvest in 1 year will not be much more than 10,000 furs this year. Piku sent slaves to carry the accumulated jerky and fur onto 2 large ships. Then, in order to save Olaf's inspection time, he told him that he had 5,000 pounds of jerky and 6,000 pounds of dried fish. Now there is enough food for 2 years. Koku gave Olaf all the dried meat in stock for the winter of the more than 10,000 furs. Seal skins have the largest number, about 5,000. Sea lion skins and fur seals have more than 2,000. Reindeer skins and musk hides each have more than 1,000, and the rest are Arctic foxes and Arctic skins. The furs of rabbits, Arctic wolves and other animals, and the most precious polar bear skins also need 15. Polar bears are difficult to kill, and their fur is white. The value of their fur has been extremely expensive since ancient times. A complete look of polar bear skin from European fur traders is 10 times the price of a black bear skin. Usually a polar bear skin can be sold for an astronomical price of £400. Olaf looked at it and couldn't help but slap his tongue. The other skins are not counted, but 15 polar bear skins are enough to buy 3 armed merchant ships with 12 artillery. Unexpectedly, Greenland's fur harvest is comparable to that of Vinland Island. His own decision to colonize Greenland now seems very wise. When the 2 ships came, they were full of grains. Although they didn't take much goods with them, they were worth hundreds of times of grain. Olaf and Hild left Piku on the morning of the 5th day when they came to Greenland. The 2 ships traveled south along the Arctic Ocean. The speed was more than 3 times faster when they were going north. When it got dark, they could not see the sea. On the floating ice that appeared from time to time, I turned my head and couldn't see Greenland, which has huge icebergs. It has obviously left the Greenland waters. Basque City. A bonfire was lit in the governor's fort, and the room was heated. Hudik and Olaf sat in front of the fire and stretched out their hands to cook on the fire. At the same time, they talked about the situation of the Labrador Peninsula. They knew one by one since Olaf came to the Basque City with food supplies and orders to take over his position yesterday. Hudik has started to explain to Olaf the methods and precautions for managing the natives of the mainland, as well as the terrain and location of Labrador, leading to strongholds, the route, the location of the remnant savages, and so on. Hudik's nearly half a year's experience gave him a deep understanding of the indigenous people on the mainland. He felt that if he couldn't teach each other, Olaf would probably suffer. You know the situations such as the stronghold, and now I am here to remind you that the savages on the mainland are used to alliances with 2, 3 to 7 or 8 tribes, and then advance and retreat together. The savages on the west and north sides of Labrador it is a small outlying tribe under the Grand Alliance. This is because the environment here is not as good as the southwestern hinterland, which means that the powerful Indian tribe alliances are all in the hinterland of the mainland. Although I have conquered many tribes on the west side of Labrador, I can clearly feel that the indigenous people here have some understanding of our fighting methods and muskets, and their tribal warriors are more courageous than Vinland's Beatau K warrior. This makes the Indian warriors of the mainland more powerful. I heard that the warriors of the Alliance tribe are more sturdy and powerful, just like the Iroquois warriors that my father and I killed in the southern plains of Quebec. They are not afraid of death. Hudik was talking, and Olaf listened in silence. After a long time, Hudik took his hands from the fire, got up and patted his aching left shoulder, and sighed, "There's a bullet in this shoulder. My shoulders will be sore and swollen on rainy days, and I can't bear the pain these few days. If you can come here for me, Hater hasn't forgotten me." Olaf stretched out on the stool and asked, "When are you going to return to Herut?" Hudik rubbed his arms and said, "I will go back tomorrow. You brought a lot of food this time, and the source of troops has increased. I know you want to occupy the entire Labrador Peninsula in one fell swoop, but it won't work before the beginning of spring. It's colder than Vinland. If you don't want to freeze to death, you have to wait until next spring." Olaf has always respected Hudik and humbly learned from him. Hearing Hudik's advice, he nodded and said, "I will be warmer next spring before sending troops. Before the big drop in temperature, I will train the soldiers and be prepared." Hudik was satisfied with Olaf's prudence, and he smiled and prepared to turn around and go to his room for a nap. Olaf suddenly called to him and asked, "Hudik, as soon as I arrived yesterday, I heard someone say that the captain of New France's replacement of Francis has arrived, and he sent you a letter asking us to withdraw from the Basque country. What's the matter?" Hudik nodded www.uxiaspit.com and said, 4 days ago, the new captain named Thiers did send someone a high-pitched letter asking us to return the illegally occupied New France. I threw my heart away. I think Francis didn't hand over with Brother Thiers after returning home. The new captain didn't understand the situation in the New World. He thought we were weak Icelandic colonists, and even thought we would be afraid. It can be seen that Francis's defeat has not been publicized, but I think Mr. Champlain will tell Mr. Captain in a few days how ignorant and rude he is. So just leave him alone. Olaf nodded and snorted coldly. If that guy dared to speak rudely after I became the governor of Basque, I would really go to occupy 1 or 2 strongholds in their new France and take the crime of illegally occupying the land. See what this arrogant guy would do? Hudic laughed and said, you have the same motivation as Hagrid, but your father will be like this when he was young. Haha. I really miss it. Hudic haha smiled and left the room. Olaf's fingers flicked over the flame, and the wind swayed the flame, and the reflection of Olaf's face was also uncertain. Vinland is now the strongest in the New World, and Plymouth in New England is also controlled by Vinland. Why is a new French colony with only 400 or 500 Frenchmen arrogant in front of us like a big cock? I can't bear this breath. Sooner or later, I'm going to give the arrogant Frenchman a little color. Olaf finished speaking and got up, then he called his guards and left in strides. Chapter 142, Respect the Powerful Presence in the East. The last batch of supplies before winter arrived in Quebec City from the Gaspé Peninsula in New France. Champlain also met the newly appointed Captain Heir. He is a thin middle-aged man with fighting spirit in his eyes. After a brief exchange, Champlain learned that the newly appointed captain in front of him was also a brave man. He did not get the approval of his governor, nor did he understand the situation, so he arbitrarily gave the Basque whaling instructions and demanded. Wenland's withdrawal is really a nasty failure. Champlain was very angry, but he only had the right to appoint and remove middle and lower level officers from the New France side. He had no right to appoint or remove the Captain Heir, and could only restrain him by using the status and power of the governor. Now Heir has made his own claim to offend Hudic, the governor of Vinland sent to the Basque country, and Champlain feels it is necessary for him to explain to Mr. Hudic. Champlain first took out his collection of maps of the New World he drew, unfolded it on the table, pointed to Wenland and said, Captain Heir, you just said that you have learned about the situation in the New World before you came. France and New England, New Netherlands and the Icelanders who occupy Vinland, but you don't know that Icelanders are currently occupying Vinland Island safely. That is to say, the indigenous people and resources of the entire island are controlled by him. The two brothers Heir and Hagrid, the leaders of the Icelanders, plundered huge wealth by relying on Vinland's resources and population. You have to know that Vinland's area is larger than that of England, Ireland or even the Kingdom of Portugal. The climate there is similar to Quebec and the northern part of our French kingdom. The Heir brothers ruled over tens of thousands of Bedak slaves every year. They can hunt tens of thousands of rare animal skins such as beavers and beavers, as well as more than 100,000 pounds of dried fish. They also own more than 10 ships, most of which are armed merchant ships with artillery. To put it bluntly, Wenland's only shortcoming at present is that its population is too small. In other respects, it is almost the same as a free state or even a country. How do you say we get along with Icelanders? Champlain's tone became more and more serious, and finally he tapped his fingers on the table twice, making a bang, and then threw the question to Heir. Heir only now knows how passive his own assertion has caused the Kingdom of France, and at the same time he is even more hostile to the Icelanders in Vinland. Champlain saw that the fire was about to come, so he asked Heir to sit down and said softly, if you let New France and Vinland use force or even war, it will be a huge loss to us, and even be charged, so I prepare to personally write a letter to the Basque governor to explain to him. Thank you, Lord Governor. Heir finally lowered his arrogant head, got up and bowed to thank Champlain. Champlain politely reminded Heir, now the British Plymouth colony has become a place controlled by the Vinland people. We must be careful to contact Vinland, neither becoming a vassal or a puppet, nor showing hostility or even hostility. Not friendly. England is different from our France. Their navy is very strong. Maybe the British will get involved soon. I think our best thing is to wait. Then why don't we help the British? To persuade the British West India Colonial Company to send armed merchant ships and mercenaries, Heir asked. Champlain scratched his itchy wrist and said, it's not good for us if the British are here. Now I have signed an agreement with Heir of Vinland. We respect and cooperate with each other and can develop the land together. This is the point of Icelanders. It's much more kind than the British guys. I think we just need to rest assured to do our things well. You will reclaim some more land on the Gaspé Peninsula next year. I have already agreed with a Huron chief Spike. Next year, he will send another 300 Huron warriors. You can take 100 to plant the land. I am going to send the rest of the people to the southern plains of Quebec to build a fort. That area is now the land we share with Vinland. The Iroquois tribe who had been harassing and attacking Quebec City for a long time had been wiped out by Heir and Francis, You will send 10 sergeants next year. We will occupy that plain, and in the future we will be able to cultivate fertile land for the Hurons to grow food for us, so that the strongholds in New France will not be afraid of Icelanders or English blocking us. Replenishment. Champlain finished his decision in one breath, and then signaled that Heir could leave. When the room calmed down, Champlain suddenly coughed and scolded, "Stupid thing. Who should send the letter? Hey, it's a pity that Jessamine is ill. It's better that he can persuade Hudic to forget your stupid thing." Soon Champlain's envoy took the letter to the Basque city by boat. Heir also returned to Gaspé's camp, and began to order his men to collect all the information about Vinland. After Hudic took a longboat back to the city of Grote, Champlain's messenger came to the Basque city and met Olaf, the new Basque governor. After reading Champlain's English letter, Olaf sent the messenger back with a polite sentence, but when the messenger left, he threw the letter into the brazier. War is not something you can control. It will come and go at will. Vikings always use muskets and spears to teach you Frenchmen what to respect people, Olaf said, touching the axe beside him, and snorted coldly. The strength of Vinland was a sudden rise in the eyes of the French. Like Champlain, it expanded from a weak colonial stronghold to the strongest colonial territory in 2 years, but Heir and Hagrid, Hudic, Olaf and others did not. It is considered normal operation, and even feels a bit slow because the development of Vinland is very similar to the growth of bamboo. Bamboo first spreads bamboo roots under the ground to brew the bamboo bag, and when the nutrients are accumulated, it will sprout and grow within a few days and become a strong, tender bamboo. Vinland also relied on the foundation laid by Hagrid's 7-year colonization to become a colonial country, far surpassing New France and New England in 2 years. In the summer of 1620, Vinland was led by Hagrid, and Olaf led 3 family servants and more than 100 contracted white slaves to enter the Sikau to develop colonial rule. At first Hagrid landed at the transit point in the southeast of the southeastern peninsula, where the climate is the warmest and convenient for fishing, and then more than 100 people felled logs to establish camps. After standing firm, he began to capture the peninsula with muskets, crossbows, and force. The Inuit and Beothuk who lived in the past were slave coolies. The timing and location of Hagrid and Olaf's landing are the most advantageous choice for the weaker Icelandic colonists, because decades ago, French fishing boats landed on the southeast peninsula to dry dried fish and even catch beah. Two people even had several battles. This makes the Aboriginal people on the peninsula do not want to get in trouble. The large ethnic groups have moved to the hinterland without leaking. They landed in Hage. There are only more than 40 tribes in the southeast peninsula, and they are in a state of scattered sand, which cannot be formed effectively. Hagrid's rebellious force allowed Hagrid and the others to gradually encroach and conquer. Before Heir and Olaf came to Vinland, Hagrid and Olaf and their 7-year colonial history in the southeast peninsula of Vinland had turned the entire peninsula into a back garden where you could come and go freely and ask for anything. The reason why there is no large-scale colonization of indigenous peoples and rule is that the first is that there are too few whites and too few livestock, and the second is that firearms and armor are also inadequate. More importantly, Hagrid and Olaf have been imitating New France and New England. The method of colonization is to carry out a small amount of colonization after the city is built, and then hunt the fur while trading with the indigenous people in exchange for the fur, and then realize it, and then purchase materials, food and contract white slaves from Europe. The adoption of this prudent colonial method allowed Hagrid and Olaf to maintain the independence and slow development of Hagrid Manor. Although the population growth rate was not high, there was no large-scale attrition, and they had a deep understanding of Vinland. As long as you have enough strength, you can wipe out all the indigenous forces in one fell swoop. Heir and Olaf brought the whole village to Vinland. www.uxiaspit.com. The colonial power of the Icelanders doubled. The brave and combative Icelandic men and white slaves were very well trained by the professional Hudic. The basic qualities of the soldiers will soon be available. They can hunt beasts with the help of traps, bows and arrows, and 2 large ships can catch fish and whales every day. Although the first year flew tightly, and even froze to death and starved to death many indigenous slaves, the Herat camp, which had more than 500 people, was still a success, surpassing New France in population, cohesion and combat effectiveness. It surpassed other colonies by far, and finally burst out with powerful energy in the spring of 1628. Agriculture, war, fishery, commerce, starting from cutting off the supply of fur to New France, under the joint efforts of many capable people such as Heir, Hagrid, Olaf, Hudic, Hoskard, Kadir, Heine, etc. and Olaf's promotion, Hellu's special city was established, and the Icelandic colony developed rapidly in many aspects under the highly efficient and concentrated rule later, relying on the massive increase in slaves and the surpassing of Iceland's climate and land. Agriculture rose rapidly, and the business activities of crossing Europe were a great success. At the same time, they also assisted the city of growth. Several aspects complemented each other, and then improved again, and finally in just 1 year, relying on the advanced muskets and cannons bought from Europe, the Viking militia smashed Vinland. And Heir became the Lord of Vinland in 1629. It relied on tens of thousands of slaves and 2,000 Vikings to explode huge productivity. By hunting and looting, they obtained piles of fur. They also produced tens of thousands of gallons of maple syrup, wine, and hundreds of thousands of pounds. The dried fish and meat in Europe eventually gained huge wealth in exchange for the European group. Fermentation began in 1629, and greater potential will erupt in the future. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143, or Change the World? The temperature in Vinland has dropped sharply again since November of the Western calendar, and then there have been a few light snowfalls. The production interaction between Basque City and Bakken City stopped first, and then Groote City and Hader City slowly stopped their activities after entering a heavy snowfall in December. The whole Vinland seemed to have been clicked on the pause button. The original landform was full of howling north winds, and there were occasional lonely and desolate wolf calls in the middle of the night, according to some Beothuk elders. In fact, there was very little snow in Vinland 20 or 30 years ago. Even if there was rain and snow, it would not be too much. More importantly, the warm sea breeze on the south coast would make the winter in southern Vinland not clear ice. But now it is getting colder and colder. Even the Beothuk people who have lived in Vinland for hundreds of thousands of years can hardly withstand the cold of Vinland in winter. Olaf was sitting in the living room of Hatterborg, covered with a blanket made of baby wolf skin, and not far away was a fireplace that was burning from time to time. Olaf seldom goes out since the big temperature drop. Today Hader went to deal with the funeral of a Viking who died of illness. Half followed a redhead Tom and others to practice throwing axe. Only Katrin and Olaf were at home. And Jelny Olaf woke up and rubbed the corners of his mouth that ran out of water, and then sighed. This winter is the same as a normal winter. People who are weak will get sick, and even if they are not careful, they will die. Since arriving in Vinland in 1627, Icelanders have died of 7 people. Among them, Yaluki's father was killed by a black bear. 2 of them were infected with wounds and died. The remaining 4 died of various strange diseases and 2 died. Child and 2 adult men. More than 10 contracted white slaves have also died, and 70 or 80 of the indigenous slaves have died. In these 2 groups, more than 20 children have died. The current medical conditions are backward. Whether it is trauma or illness, it can only be handled simply. Basically, it is completely dependent on your own physical fitness. It was the old Gelder who died this morning. It is said that he went out to urinate after drinking alcohol last night. As a result, he slipped and injured, and then he was frozen to death. Olaf originally wanted to go, but the Icelandic custom is not to allow children to participate in the funeral ceremonies, so Hader stayed at home and went with haggard old Gelder. Is only in his 60s this year. Except for some leg pains, his overall body is pretty good. He didn't expect to die if he didn't see him for a week. Olaf's mood was also somewhat depressed, but he knew very well that this is the case in this era. Human life is very fragile, and a small disease or small wound can take away human life. The eating habits and living environment of Icelanders are not healthy now, so few of the elders of the Olaf family can live through their 70s, and the same is true for other families. Although Vinland died of illness every year, some children between the ages of 0 and 6 or 7 were also killed, but with sufficient food, whether it was Icelanders, indentured white slaves, or Beothuk slaves, the fertility rate was high. With steady improvement, 4 or 5 newborns will arrive every month. But only 2/3 of them can live to the full moon. Olaf had discovered a phenomenon long ago when he was in Iceland. The kind of gray-haired and old-aged old people like the Bjorn dynasty hundreds of years later have almost never seen in Iceland. The oldest of the more than 100 people in Herit village in the White Hazel Forest is the older brother of Gerdard. He was 72 years old when he died a year before, and he was one of the oldest people in the 3 or 4 surrounding villages. Olaf only observed one village in Heir village in the White Hazel Forest, and found that although the ratio of men to women among more than 100 people is close to balance, there are less than 10 people over 50 years old, and now there are only 8 people. For a moment, the average life expectancy of Icelanders should be very low. Wetlands conditions are even worse, the case fatality rate and mortality rate of the indigenous people are higher, and the average life expectancy of wetland is even lower. In addition to the small number of elderly people in Iceland, there are very few disabled people. Most of the children who are unable to take care of themselves, such as dementia and polio, live less than 3 years old due to subjective and objective reasons. The indigenous tribes of wetland would drown if children with disabilities were discovered. Although this behavior is cruel, it is not a relief, because under the backward production conditions, non-aristocratic families cannot feed disabled children because of the death of old Gelder. Olaf's thoughts flew to the distant sky. After turning countless thoughts, he finally sighed and whispered in Mandarin, "How many things will rise and fall through the ages? The Yangtze River is rolling," picked up the blanket and stood up. Olaf secretly rejoiced in his heart that he was born in the home of the head of the village. He had a good skin and body, and he was able to eat and wear warmly since he was a child. If you are born again in a commoner or even a poor family, then the fate will be miserable, and it is unknown whether you can grow up or not. The current situation and experience are compared with the future generations. Olaf also misses the future generations more and more, and misses and longs for that era in the future. Science changes the world. When I take power in the future, I must set up a university and invite scientists such as Newton, Descartes, Bryce, Leibniz, Galileo, Kepler, etc. The guidance of the company can enter the first industrial revolution ahead of schedule. Greatly improve the standard of production and living. Olaf was triggered by the death of old Gelder. His ambitions continued to expand, and his dreams became even greater. Originally, when he was born again, Olaf wanted to live well, and then to be a rich man with a healthy and long life. If he had the conditions, he would go to the Far East to see later. Hagrid killed Sigfrith's son. When discussing the escape, Olaf had an idea that he could let his uncle go to colonize North America, and he would be able to participate in it when he grew up. At that time, Olaf was only thinking about giving his family a place in North America in the future, grabbing wealth at most, and having his own territory. As the family business became more and more prosperous after coming to Wenland, Olaf, like his father and elder brother, has ambitions that expand with the growth of his career and continuous success. At present, Heir has already thought about how to occupy as many territories as possible in North America, then establish a state, and then return to Iceland to expel the Danish governor, avenge the hatred, remove Iceland from the control of Denmark and Norway, and let the Icelanders manage Iceland themselves. Because Olaf was young, reading www.uucanchu.com was more greedy than his father. He wanted to occupy the entire North America and make his family the master of this huge country, comparable to the entire European area. As for the barren Iceland, he did not take it to heart. Olaf has now determined his inner thoughts, that is to develop Vinland and other areas in North America in his hands, and use this as a base and food supply to counterattack Iceland. Iceland must be occupied, so that there will be a bridgehead for attacking Europe. Tens of thousands of people in Iceland can also become the foundation for leading North American natives and white slaves. As for revenge, killing Sigfurs, if he can break into Iceland, the little Sigfurs will not be an opponent. After the capture and secession of Iceland, the next step is to ally with the mighty Sweden to carve up Norway while Denmark is weak, so that it will have the support of going south to Europe. Olaf thinks that he can take a bigger step. After occupying Northern Europe, it is okay to send fleets and Viking regiments to help Daeming suppress the rebellion and build slaves. By then, the Far East will have a share of his own, and he will also go south with France and Sweden. Partitioning of Germany and Poland are both good choices. After the integration of resources in North America, Iceland, Northern Europe, and even Central Europe, it will definitely become one of the most powerful countries in the world. Promote the Industrial Revolution, emancipate the mind, and advance science, medicine and other people's livelihood-related industries. As long as the investment is not considered to create a scientific research environment, the speed of world development will definitely increase. It's impossible to watch TV and make phone calls, but as long as you can rapidly improve the level of technology, you may be able to live telegrams and listen to the radio in your old age. Thinking about it, Olaf's eyes flickered, his fists were also clenched, and he let go for a long time. Chapter 144, Winter Snow in 1629, 2-in-1. The sky is gloomy and dark, Snowflakes are constantly flying in the violent north wind, and the mountains on the earth are undulating, all of which turned into white as the accumulation of snowflakes. Trees, mountains, rivers, and houses all merge into one at this moment. Except for the kukapoof, which is overwhelmed by branches, breaking and falling to the ground. It is the muffled sound of falling snow and ice. The loneliness makes people just want to be stable in a warm room. Sleep steadily. The second year of Changzhen is coming to an end. The battered country of Ming Dynasty still dominates like a paper tiger in the central plains, making the surrounding small countries fearful. The fierce battle of the Haojin army that entered Beijing from Zifen Pass dozens of days ago is still fresh in the memories of the people of Beijing, and traces of the war can be seen everywhere. The broken wall of the city wall has not been repaired yet. Snowflakes slowly filled the wounds caused by the artillery fire on the ancient city. The people in the city were diminished by the celebration of the new year. Their fears and worries about war, and the deepest worries about the Ming Empire were buried deeper. The most sacred and majestic palace of the Daming Kingdom in the east is also covered with ice and snow. Emperor Changzhen, who was reviewing the memorial in the palace, put down his brush, twisted his sore wrist and got up and walked outside to look at the vast world and surrounding towering ancient palaces, and let out a clear cough from his throat. "Huh, Your Majesty, it's late at night, why don't you rest? Take care of your dragon body." An old in a red robe quietly walked 5 steps behind Changzhen, and said softly, "Emperor Changzhen is only 18 years old this year." When he was young and vigorous, he raised his brows and sternly said, "The country is difficult, and Jian can fight to Beijing. How can I go to sleep?" The old knelt down in a hurry, and said, "The slave is incompetent, and I can't share the worries for your majesty." Changzhen felt weak after thinking of the friendship for many years. He only felt that he shouldn't anger others, let alone get angry with his companions, but his chest was really hot and uncomfortable, so he hummed in a deep voice. "Get up." Huichin, Xiao Huichin got up and didn't dare to persuade this stubborn little master anymore. After a while, Changzhen suddenly asked, "Has the thief accounted for it?" The gloomy tone made Xiao Huichin's heart burst. He knew that his majesty could be so resentful. It was the former governor Ji Liao, Yuan Chonghuan, the Shangshu of the Ministry of War, and Yuan Dadua who did not directly call his name. This man was deeply favored by the emperor but killed the general. It's just that in October this year, Jian slaves led the army commander to drive straight into Beijing and besieged Beijing. If it were not for the soldiers' lives, the consequences would be disastrous. The Dongcheng secret report was received in the harem after the defense war of the capital. Yuan Chonghun turned out to be in tandem with the puppet Emperor Wang Taiji. He already had 2 hearts, so His Majesty sent Yuan Chonghun to prison for interrogation. Xiao Huichin knew that His Majesty hated Yuan Chonghun, so he hurriedly said, after the slave's rigorous interrogation, Yuan Chonghun refused to admit the crime of treason, and instead shouted wronged. He said it was a false accusation. Boom. Changzhen kicked and turned over the article, and yelled, "Hateful." He negotiated with his slaves without authorization. Is it a fake to kill Mao Wenlong without authorization? Please check carefully. If you can't find out how many gangsters he still has, I only ask you. The slave obeys. Your Majesty, calm down. Xiao Huichin knew that Xiaoi was really angry, so he knelt to take orders. After Xiao Huichin hurriedly left, the voice of Emperor Changzhen's condemnation against Yuan Chonghun could still be heard in the hall. The eunuchs inside and outside the hall were trembling with fright. They only felt that the air was getting colder and colder, and it seemed that even the wind and snow outside could blow in. Guanwei Shengjing in the imperial palace, the tiger-backed Emperor Dajin, Tian Kongkan Wang Taiji sat in the warm pavilion. Sitting next to him is the petite West Palace side Fujin Bumubute, who is the future Empress Xiaozhuang. Wang Taiji is 37 years old this year, but Bumubute, who is only 16 years old this year, has been married to Wang Taiji for 4 years. He gave birth to little princess in the first month of last year. She is a typical underage hot mom. Wang Taiji liked this side Fujin very much. He was very fat and blessed. He took his 4th daughter from Bumubute's arms. After teasing for a while, the child burst into tears. Wang Taiji frowned and handed it to him. The nanny standing on the side said, "Go breastfeeding Grid." After the plump and juicy nanny hugged Grid and left, Bumubute stretched out her white tender hand to hold Wang Taiji's palm, and said softly, "Your Majesty, what's upsetting you?" Wang Taiji's favorite thing about Bumubute is that she is smart and understanding. He pulled her into her arms with a smile, and said faintly, "The red-clothed cannon is a bit difficult to imitate, and there is still no idea." Huh? This although Singzhen used a counterplan to mess up the position of the little emperor of the Ming dynasty, he was confused and sent Yuan Chonghun to prison. Haha, it would be much better for us to get rid of Yuan Chonghun. But when we attacked Beijing 2 months ago, our warriors still suffered from the artillery of the Ming army. If only we had more than a dozen cannons, then we could have entered the Forbidden City and captured the little Emperor Changzhen. All of us can celebrate the New Year in the Forbidden City this year. In this way, the cannon must be imitated. Xia Ozhuang also knows that the power of artillery is huge, especially when attacking a city. The 8 banners find soldiers are brave and good at fighting. They can be 10 or even 100 when they fight with the Ming army, but when they reach the siege, the 8 banners have no advantage. Dakin wanted to enter the customs. Instead, he had to have artillery to break the battlefield. Therefore, after seeing Yingming Khan Amma being killed by Yuan Chonghun's artillery, Tian Kong Khan began to be faked from the battlefield. Red Cannon Bumbute suddenly remembered that the exquisite Central Plains jewelry that he had obtained in the palace some time ago was said to have been given by Fan Yongdao, a fur merchant in Shaanxi. Zhu, etc., is considered a partner of Dakin. Your Majesty, the 8 banners guys are not proficient in making cannons, and the Han people in Liaobi have no skills. It is better to let Fan Yongdao from Shaanxi find some good blacksmiths for us. Well, I don't even mention Afei. I forgot that there are few merchants in Shaanxi. Wang Taiji laughed, stretched out his big hand and slapped Bute's ass, and smiled. Afei is really lovely. I will rest here tonight. Paris Louvre. The thin and tall Prime Minister Richelieu got down from the magnificent carriage in front of the palace and walked into the palace in the snow. Passing through the large gallery designed by the king himself, and turning around a few halls, Richelieu walked into a small room behind the throne room, and a guard came out from the side. "Prime Minister, is your Majesty there?" Richelieu asked in a deep voice, with a pale face. The guard said hesitantly, "Your Majesty is." He told anyone not to disturb. Richelieu knew very well that His Majesty had a tryst with his lover again. He reformed internally, suppressed the opposition, and actively encouraged Denmark and Sweden to deal with the Habsburgs. This Majesty only had a tryst with his lover, for Queen Anna. But they ignored it, so far that neither of them had given birth to an heir. Richelieu was in a bad mood. He had already dealt with a male lover of His Majesty, but he didn't expect that His Majesty would get worse now. With a cold snort, Richelieu said, "Captain Mahal, please inform your Majesty that I am waiting for him on the throne." After talking about Richelieu resolutely turned and left. Chief Guard Mahal knocked on the door of the room with a look of embarrassment, and then pushed the door in. He saw His Majesty and 2 women entangled naked, and even a woman was riding on him. He was beaten with a whip and made a strange noise. "What's happening?" The happy Louis Zie looked at the chief guard very angrily. Seeing his embarrassment on his face, he suddenly realized, and said, "Get me dressed." The 2 mistresses hurriedly picked up the clothes and put them on for Louis Zie. 10 minutes later, Louis Zie walked into the throne hall and saw Richelieu sitting quietly, and said with a smile, "Prime Minister, why are you here?" "Excuse me, Your Majesty." Richelieu wanted to educate His Majesty a few words as he spoke, but he resisted, thinking that business matters were important. He took out a war report and a letter from his arms and said, "Under the mediation of the minister, Sweden and Poland truce in September. Now Gustavi the world has agreed to send troops to the south." Louis Zie took the battle report and read it clearly, and then said, "Okay, I know there is nothing difficult to get the Prime Minister. You want me to approve your support to Gustavi when the Parliament is convened tomorrow. Is it a request for military spending?" "Yes, Your Majesty, because the funds involved are too big. I am afraid that the Queen Mother will have trouble tomorrow." Richelieu meant it very clearly, that is, if it is a small amount of money, I will not trouble you, but there is a lot of money. Past in Parliament, Louis Zie knew very well that if the Habsburgs were not suppressed, the German region would be expected to be unified due to the victory of the Holy Roman Emperor. By then, the status of France would be impacted, so helping the Protestant alliance suppress the Holy Roman Empire. What must be done is politically correct and beyond doubt. "Don't worry, Prime Minister." Louis XIII nodded, picked up the letter and said, "Tomorrow the Parliament will discuss it normally, and I will support you to pass the military expenditure for Sweden's participation in the war." Snow flies outside the window, and the sky gradually darkens for Derek Palace in the Hillerød region, 150 miles northwest of Copenhagen, Denmark, is the most luxurious and magnificent palace in Denmark. Since Christian IV came to the throne, it has spent a lot of money to renovate, and then the Danish royal family lives in this island castle surrounded by lakes. The atmosphere of preparing to spend Christmas in the past is completely gone this year, and the entire palace is gloomy, because this year's fiscal revenue across Denmark is the least in previous years. There is also a proposal for reconstruction in the Jutland Peninsula to be thrown at Christian IV. On the table of the world, it was marked that it would cost £100,000 in silver. Beginning in the second half of 1626, when Christian IV's imperial conquest and the army of Habsburg fought, he retreated steadily, and was even driven back to Jutland. Then the tug-of-war was fought for 1 or 2 years. The Jutland Peninsula was raided by the German Legion and the defeated Danish mercenaries, and it was turned into purgatory with 10 rooms and 9 empty spaces. And 100 miles away in May of this year, Denmark and Habsburg signed an armistice agreement. Christian IV's ambition was finally buried on the battlefield of the 30 Years' War. His country's accumulated income was spent, and Jutland was burned and looted by the mercenaries of the two countries. Became the hardest hit area. Since the second half of the year, there have been increasing calls from all parts of Denmark to reduce agricultural taxes, and Jutland is asking the king to grant subsidies to help the people rebuild their homes. Christian IV felt that he had become a clown. He not only became the laughingstock of the kings of various countries, but also made his people laugh and look down upon him. Since he returned to Copenhagen, he has plunged into the Frederiksberg Palace. The young ministers all came to meet, and several parliaments were held, but Christian always felt that their eyes were mocking recently, which made Christian IV's Christmas and New Year's mood very bad. I heard that the French side has sent someone to invite Sweden to join the war, and Gustav I agreed. Ulf, you said that Gustav I was going to attack Habsburg after forming an alliance with me last year. At that time, if I agreed, would I be able to maintain my identity as the savior of the Protestant country? Christian IV, wearing a gold-trimmed wooling robe, stood in front of the window and looked at the frozen lake in the distance. Talking casually in the room stood a tall, handsome young man with blonde hair. He is the current patriarch of the richest family in Denmark, Fitz-Ulf, son-in-law of Christian IV, and also the cabinet treasurer, from Christian IV. The person whom the world has trusted the most since returning to Denmark. Fitz-Ulf knew that his father-in-law was again in self-sorrow. The Nordic lion in Sweden has always been His Majesty's destined enemy. His Majesty wanted to gain status by leading the Protestant alliance to participate in the war, and to enhance Denmark's status and honor. Land and wealth thus completely suppressed the budding King of Sweden, but the day failed. His Majesty King Dam failed. But Gustav I of Sweden will take over as His Majesty and declare war on Germany. www.uxiaspit.com. If Sweden wins, then Denmark will be unable to live in Northern Europe. Your Majesty, even you have lost. How can Gustav I defeat Habsburg? Ulf was very appropriate to persuade Christian IV. King Dan seemed to have caught a life-saving straw, nodded and said, yes, although Gustav agreed to Poland, but Habsburg the mercenaries are not easy to deal with. But we must also guard against the fluke of Gustav I. I think you can go to Russia. Tsar Romanov and Filaret have always wanted to unite with me, and then suppress the rising Sweden and assist. They threatened Poland from the sea. I didn't pay any attention to it before, but to prevent any accidents, it is necessary to maintain contact and friendship. Christian IV deserves to be the Danish hero. Although there is a mess in his mind, he still keenly caught the point of suppressing the neighbors. Okay, I'll prepare a gift tomorrow. Ulf bowed and saluted very wisely, and then slowly backed out. Christian IV murmured a little nervously, I want to win over the United Kingdom. In a few days, I will take the young Christian to London as a guest. I must win the financial and diplomatic support of the United Kingdom. Speaking of which, I am still Charlie's uncle. Relatives always have to be easy to talk. Now the domestic economic chaos has become a mess, and a loan must be borrowed from the UK, but now we still have to raise taxes in the Sogn Strait and Iceland first, or even the salaries of government workers will not be able to pay next year. After speaking, Christian IV remembered the documents of the nobles in various places asking for tax cuts and relief. He felt his scalp numb and his eyes ached. After a cold snort, he sat down with a sigh. Chapter 145, Buchan City. The severe winter may be just borrowing sleep, eating and drinking for the nobles living in the palace compound. They may dislike the long winter and look forward to the arrival of spring. When the weather is warm, they can hold cocktail parties and salons. Now, you can go hunting and spring outing, and there are always all kinds of interesting pastimes for the poor. They are also looking forward to the winter passing quickly, because the poor people who don't have enough fuel can only wear all the clothes and stay in bed shivering in winter most of the time. Only after the arrival of spring can the poor leave their homes to find food and work. Winland's environment is colder than that in Europe, so every year symbiotic people with poor health are killed by freezing, starving, and sickness. But this winter, whether it is the city of Grote or the newly built Hader city, or the city of Bakens and the Basque city to the west of the strait, this year, relying on sufficient food and warm longhouses, there is basically no freezing. Starve anyone to death. Bakken city, as the traditional leader of Vinland Island, has a different meaning to any Bedak. The morning sun in the early spring dispelled the haze and made the ice-covered Bakken city gleam. The governor of Buchan city, Blackstone, dressed in a leather jacket made of hundreds of squirrel skins, sat in the temple. The idol behind him has been replaced by a tall male idol. This idol has a big beard, holding a large axe in his left hand and a right hand. The musket looks somewhat similar to Hader. It is the Hader statue made by the descendants ordered by Blackstone as the governor. This is not only to please his master Hader, but also to let win through the establishment of faith and the reform of the temple. Many scattered tribes in the western Lanzhou region and Changling Mountains in the north and south belonged to themselves and changed their beliefs. It has been more than a year since Blackstone became the governor last year. Since he took power, he has reformed Bakken city with the assistance of 10 white slave gunmen and 200 white wolf warriors. First removed more than 50 fanatics who were strong in traditional beliefs in winter, then trained all priests and other priests, and compiled a song sutra introducing and praising the Hader god. In the spring of the second year, all the staff were ordered to sing the sutra twice a day, and they would go into the temple to bow down. Only after singing and bowing can they go out hunting and gathering food. For the people who can grasp the spirit and praise the Hader god, Hishi immediately promoted to the production team leader, and rewarded women, jerky and so on. In addition to the abolition of the traditional religious reform of the gods of nature and conversion to the gods of Hader, Blackstone also adopted institutional reforms, imitating the Viking thunder developed by the master Hader, and also set up small production teams and large-scale production teams in Bakken city. The production team has 3 structures. The small production team has more than 10 people, the production team has more than 50 people, and the large production team has more than 100 people. Above the large production team, there are also leaders who manage 10 large production teams. Small production captains and captains are all promoted young people who show devotion to the Hader gods, while the squad captains and coalition captains are selected from the White Wolf soldiers. After the establishment of the management system, Blackstone also implemented a strict system of rewards and punishments. Rewards are only limited to the performance of beliefs. The prizes are dried meat, slaves, etc. Punishment covers a wide range. Ineffective work and insincere faith will be punished, ranging from whipping and starvation to being a slave or even cutting off the nose. In less than a year, the city of Buchans broke out extremely strong fighting power under the tyrannical rule of Blackstone, and the surrounding tribes all surrendered and announced their conversion to Hader. The power of Bakken city also expanded to the Changling Mountain generation in the north and south in 1629. Hundreds of tribes, large and small, successively merged, making Bakken city in Blackstone a political, military and economic center that manages tens of thousands of people. It is precisely because Blackstone has more control and deterrence than the original leader of the Bakkens Long Lake tribe over the various tribes of Wenland. This spring can provide more than 2,000 beasts for the eastbound fleet of Hagrid and Olaf. Pi has made an indelible contribution to Wenland's prosperity and development. In the spring of this year, under the guidance of 10 white slave musketeers, Blackstone began to order the slaves to open up wasteland and cultivate land. After simply clearing up hundreds of acres of land on the south side of Changhu Lake, he planted corn, pumpkins and beans, and relied on Changhu Lake to fish and hunt around. As well as the collection of wild fruits and previous grains, the city of Bakkens also achieved a bumper harvest in the autumn. Blackstone plans to start expanding the city-state tomorrow spring, migrating some people from the tribes of Changling Mountain, and using the ignorant natives of remote mountainous areas to dilute the original residents of Bakken city. This is a very conducive means to maintain the system. The wise Blackstone worked hard to learn everything in the city of Grote when he followed Hader. Now he can finally do it in Bakken city, Sitting on a stone stool covered with deerskin, Blackstone, I feel that I have become Wetland's most successful Beatic in hundreds of years. There are 4 braziers burning in the temple. In addition to Blackstone, there are also Captain Beartooth, who is in charge of 200 White Wolf soldiers, 3 coalition captains and the chiefs of the 4 surrounding large tribes. There is a row of chairs behind Blackstone. It was 10 white slave soldiers, and the 19 people in the temple were the leaders who ruled the entire west of Vinland. It's now in February, and the weather is starting to get warmer. How many people die from freezing to death in the various alliances and tribes in winter? Hishi, who had gained weight, looked around for a week and asked in standard Old Norse language. This was the first meeting held in Bakken City in 4 months from before the beginning of winter to February 1630. The last time a meeting of this size was held was the autumn harvest meeting. At that time, the situation in various regions was discussed and regulations were stipulated. The rations and fur to be paid by the tribes in the area. Blackstone learned thoroughly from Heir, and even moved the situation and process of holding meetings. But it is indeed much better to conduct high-level discussions and make decisions on your own. After hearing the words of the black market, everyone got up and answered, and they all spoke the most standard Old Norse language, which is Icelandic this year, because the food is basically enough, and the population of the surrounding tribes in Bakken City has been reduced a lot, so that the materials are abundant, gathering and hunting are easier, which makes Bakken City and surrounding tribes prepare related materials for the winter, such as food, wood, fur, etc. are abundant. So in the Bakkens area with a population of 6,000, less than 100 people died this winter. www.uxiaspit.com. Most of them died from diseases. And more than 500 babies were born, and there are currently about 400 survivors. Full of calculations this year, the population of Bakken City is guaranteed to grow. Compared with the negative growth of last year when Blackstone was governor in charge of Bakken City, it is much stronger. Blackstone is very happy. He thinks that he has given full play to his abilities. The achievements made this year will surely make the Master Heir very pleased. After discussing the spring hunting operation that will begin after the ice and snow continue to melt next week, everyone relaxes and starts chatting over wine. After a while, Blackstone suddenly remembered the great harvest in Harut City that he had heard about before the winter. Master Olaf provided potatoes and sweet potatoes for planting so that they could plant a lot. The sweet potatoes and potatoes of Harut City were harvested last autumn. After several warehouses, I heard that I can't finish eating every day. I heard that sweet potatoes and potatoes are very high yielding, and they taste good. We will have spring plowing at the end of next month. I think we can apply for some potatoes and sweet potato seeds to the gods for planting. What do you think? Blackstone's opinion. Naturally no one would raise objections. Everyone praised Governor Blackstone's thoughtfulness. She laughed and said, "Okay. That's it. Let's start the spring hunt in 5 days. We must fight to kill more white wolves and many wild beasts. We must not only replenish most of the meat consumed in the winter, but also help this year." Jinglei Dang went to Europe to trade to provide leather goods. Speaking of it, I still miss my master a bit. I will personally lead the convoy of leather goods to Groat at the end of next month, and ask the owner for some potatoes and sweet potatoes by the way. Quotation mark. Chapter 146, 1630 Years of Spring Breeze. Clouds want clothes and flowers, and the spring breeze is dazzling. If you don't seek Wanai Mountain, you will meet at Teote under the moon. This is a Tang poem by the poet Li Bai. When Olaf opened the window one morning in February 1630, he saw the morning glow spreading on the mountains with ice and snow in the distance. He watched the golden light twinkling, and the chirping of birds and the chill breeze blowing on his face. This poem popped out in an instant. Olaf looked at the magnificent natural scenery for a while, then stretched out and said, 1630 has arrived, and the factory can continue to operate. Going downstairs and out of the castle, Olaf saw many of his slaves helping with work such as cutting wood and cleaning manure. Seeing that all the slaves and the young master stopped to bow and salute Olaf, they shouted, "Master, the houses outside Harderberg are all family slaves. There are more than 400 slaves in Heir, and there are more than 300 slaves in Olav and Olaf. Now they are all married and have children. The prosperity of the city contributes silently. The weather in Harut City has slightly warmed since February. Although agricultural production cannot be carried out, fishing has been carried out every other day since last week, and hunting is carried out every day by 3 teams of men and horses." Olaf called one of his own slaves, and then ordered him to inform the people working in the factory to start working today. After the young slave trotted away, Olaf walked back to the warm room to eat the loving breakfast made by his mother Catelyn, instructing his sister Jelny, a plate of boiled potatoes and fried fish sprinkled with black pepper, and another plate goat's milk with smoke. Your sister is still young. I can only teach her simple meals. Goat's milk is added with dried coriander and caramel. You should like it. Katrin sat beside Olaf and motioned to Olaf to taste. Olaf glanced at his sister opposite with expectation, and his younger brother Half, who was sitting on his right hand. Half seemed to like Jelny's food very much. He ate it hungrily, and nodded at the same time. Olaf couldn't stand the smell of coriander lingering on the tip of his nose. He felt that the goat's milk was hard to swallow, but looking at his sister's expression, Olaf couldn't bear to make her sad, so he finished eating in one go, and finally hiccuped and said, "It's delicious, but I don't think it's good to add coriander to goat's milk." Gurney nodded and said, "Then I will add some pepper and spices next time." Cough. Olaf almost choked, waved his hand and said, "I don't want it anymore. I'm ready to eat and I'm going to the factory, so I won't go home at noon." Half suddenly jumped up and said, "Brother, I want to go with you." Olaf wanted to refuse, but remembered that his younger brother was also suffocated at home, so he nodded and said, "That's good. Let's go." The brothers walked out of Hatterberg and looked around on the gravel road. They saw that there was no snow on the streets of the huge city. Vikings, white slaves, and indigenous slaves were all busy. Some were carrying water and some were cutting wood. Most of them took out the bedding and clothes, and wanted to take advantage of the good sun today. It has been used for a winter. It must be damp and smelly, and it will be much better after drying if you ignore people's appearance and skin color. The feeling here is almost the same as the village of Harald in the white hazel forest in Iceland. Half is 9 years old this year. He is 4 feet and 9 inches tall. Although he is nearly 1.5 meters shorter than Olaf, he is almost the same as the short native slave. The genes of the Heir family are the most traditional Nordic genes. The heights of offspring and grandchildren are very good. Not surprisingly, Half will be more than 1.8 meters tall in the future. Olaf saw that his younger brother had changed a lot since he came to Wenland for 2.5 years. He was originally a fearless temperament, and he also likes to fight and fight. When he came to Wenland, he rarely studied poetry, literature, mathematics, etc. Knowledge is only a little knowledge of English and Danish. Instead, I learnt bows, arrows, swords and other crafts all day with Viking soldiers and White Wolf soldiers. Now the horses at home can be ridden proficiently, and they are definitely top students with perfect scores in sports. Olaf looked at his brother's strong body, but realized that there was a problem, and that was Wenland's education. Now Wenland's agriculture, fisheries, light industry, etc. are on the right track. People's production and life are stable and orderly. In the future, as long as coal, iron ore, etc. can be excavated, heavy industry can be developed, but there are still many shortcomings in Wenland's social foundation, such as the lack of medical care and the lack of culture. These two areas are not harmful for the time being, but over time, it will likely cause hidden dangers in the collapse of Wenland's society. Because of an area with a large population, a civilized society, there must be a doctor profession that protects the human body and seeks medical treatment. Although the current medical development in Europe is lagging behind, the surgical technology is very advanced, and there are some mature solutions to cope with infectious diseases. Therefore, the infection rate and fatality rate have been constantly in the past 100 years of the Black Death going down compared with Europe's more advanced Arab doctors and the Chinese medicine of the Chinese dynasty. They are able to use herbal medicine to create pharmaceutics for the treatment of many diseases, especially Chinese medicine, as well as treatment methods such as acupuncture, moxibustion, and the most advanced methods of health preservation. Olaf feels that Wenland's stomach problem has been solved. The next step is to solve physical and brain problems. Several doctors with advanced medical skills must be invited to come. Otherwise, Wenland will be in trouble if there is an outbreak of disease or a cold or more. In terms of medical security, it is only necessary to spend a high price to hire doctors from Arabs and even the Celestial dynasty. When the time comes, people will be able to train local medical students, slowly develop the pharmaceutical industry, and even open clinics and hospitals. Olaf has already had a draft on medical issues. He plans to go to Europe this year and bring back a few Arab doctors. At the same time, he tried to ask the Dutch East India Company to invite a few old Chinese doctors from Daming to www.wuxiaspit.com, but Olaf suddenly realized the educational problem. Now the most important foundation of civilization is the inheritance and development of culture. The Celestial Kingdom relied on political and cultural schools. such as academies, private schools, monasteries, and Taoist schools, to spread, develop and preserve culture. European culture has always been attached to the church. When the church's mission is always the master of culture, every child in the parish must learn theology and brainwashing in the church school after birth, and at the same time learn some knowledge and culture such as language and music. However, although various European countries in the late Middle Ages wanted to get rid of religious control and have more rights, more and more universities were run by the state. For example, there were Copenhagen University in Denmark, Cambridge University and Oxford University in England. Theology, philosophy, and law, medicine, mathematics, linguistics, etc. are the main courses of the university. Every year, we are constantly training and delivering talents to various countries. Of course, these talents are basically from aristocrats. The working people who are struggling below the poverty line cannot afford to support themselves. Of children go to college from the birth of civilization to the current 17th century in Europe, there is no such thing as a class of scholars, farmers, and business in ancient Eastern countries. In European civilization, there will always be aristocrats leading the people. Almost all kings, bishops, and officials are born from nobles. The difference is only the size of the family and the length of the inheritance time. Of course, with the emergence of the emerging bourgeoisie in the future, it will also break the pattern of more than 1 or 2,000 years in Europe. https://genius remembers this site address in 1 second. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 147, Start. Send red envelope. Reading benefits are here. You have up to 888 cash red envelopes to be drawn. Follow the Weeks in Public account, Book Friends Basecamp, to draw red envelopes. Half is now the little son of Raid and General Hater. Every day, because there is no school in the city of Grote, he can only do nothing. Even if Heine serves as the tutor for the 2 little guys in Hater's family, there are only 2 classes a week, and the rest of the time is free, which is not conducive to Hater's development and growth. There are more than 800 Viking families living in Harrod City, and they are unable to solve the education problems of their children now that the population is small. There are few children, the problem has not been exposed, and the educational needs of Viking children are not strong, but if it cannot be solved, the future will be a big problem, because illiterate people will always be unable to govern a city, state or country, let alone manage the army. Become a technician. The future of Wenland still has to be passed on to the children of the present, so we must find teachers to teach Wenland's children and cultivate talents. Olaf thought of the profound content of education through half. He believes that whether it is the Celestial Dynasty or Europe, the academy, school, has played a vital role in the development of national civilization. Therefore, Wenland also needs schools. Previously, there were no conditions. Now, after solving the problem of hunger and fullness, Wenland will start to open schools this year, so that it can brainwash the next generation of Vikings and even the indigenous people. Culturally creating the concept of Vikings, while also cultivating elites in various industries and enhancing national power. The more he watched his brother wielding the hatchet while walking, the more determined the idea in Olaf's mind: running a school must start as soon as possible. Now Wenland has a small population, basically only 30% of white slaves and 50% of Vikings are educated, and their educational level is also uneven. Few only know part of their sons and mothers, and many have more than 5 years of experience. Church school, but people who really have a good cultural background can't find 30 people, and only Heine is the one who has gone to college. These 30-odd people are all responsible for important tasks in all aspects of production and life in the city of Grote. They usually work as tutors in Viking families at most. Olaf feels that it is not a good idea to use them to start a school. The best way is to go to the European continent to find people with literacy to serve as teachers. Just like looking for a doctor this year, we may try to find scholars, scientists and missionaries who want to develop in the New World in various European countries, and invite these highly educated talents to Wenland to run schools, but it is very likely that truly educated people will not come to the New World. In the end, it is most likely to find the pastor of the church. When Olaf was thinking about entering the factory, all the craftsmen and apprentices of the factory were all there, including Mr. Hunter and other 6 technicians in mineral exploration and mining. Talking a few words, everyone walked into the factory workshop and sat down. Then Olaf looked at a lot of materials in the warehouse and ordered the work to start. Many master craftsmen and their apprentices began to take materials from the warehouse and produce woodware, wooden armor, leather goods and other tools. Porcelain craftsmen had insufficient materials to make bone china, So they could only make pottery first. Mr. Hunter looked around and was amazed. Master Olaf, I want to express my sincere admiration to you. Your factory is more complete than what I saw in London. The only difference is that the equipment and skilled workers are insufficient. I think if you have enough workers, you can expand the porcelain firing workshop, and the rest of the stoneware and woodware can be cancelled. Wouldn't it be okay to burn the porcelain with all your strength? I really can't imagine that you still master the secrets of porcelain firing. It's really amazing. Mr. Hunter looked at Olaf in amazement with an exaggerated tone. The 5 craftsmen around him also looked surprised. Obviously he did not expect that Olaf's factory could even make porcelain, which is a luxury purchased in the Far East. Olaf shook his head slightly and said, Sir, you don't understand. Porcelain firing is very wonderful. It is difficult for other craftsmen to master the link of billet making and firing. But you did remind me that I think I will reduce the workers in other workshops in the future. Apprentice, this year I plan to purchase some textile machines from Europe. This year I can try to grow cotton and spin cotton cloth. Oh? Cotton? That's a very rare fabric, Mr. Hunter said with a smile. I wish Master Olaf every success in your plans for this year, Mr. Hunter. When are you going to go to Changling Mountain to start the mining project? Olaf asked about the mine in the west of Winland. Hunter looked at each other, and finally smiled, and said, Your Excellency General Hader has ordered us to go next week. We are going to prepare a team of 2. I am responsible for the mining of copper and gold mines, and Edward is responsible for the northern iron mines. The mining of the coal mine is in charge of Robert because Winland lacks too much equipment, so we plan to find the weakest area and let miners conduct direct excavation and open pit mining. In this way, the daily mining volume will be small, and the quality of the ore cannot be guaranteed. The initial mining volume there will be very few, even if it rains. I can't work. After listening to Hunter's words, Olaf nodded very understandingly. Everything is difficult at first, as long as mining can be carried out. I believe that my father will send enough slaves to mine. Workers, please rest assured. As for the tools, I miss you. You can write a list, and we will take a boat to Europe to buy in a while. Master Olaf, you are really not like a teenager at this age. I listen to you like an aristocratic boss facing London. Don't worry, we will write a detailed list of supplies before we leave, as long as we have enough equipment and tools. I believe that in the second half of this year, the mining volume of mines will definitely increase. Hunter praised Olaf without a trace, and then patted his chest to make sure Olaf also smiled. You should tell my father what you said. But I believe in your abilities. Several people were talking. The slave and Olaf's dozens of skilled workers from Adingsaden pushed a few carts of sweet potatoes that had just been taken out of the cellar into the factory. At this time, Half had been studying around the wood craftsman. Olaf asked his brother to stand up and say, Come on, I will show you the process of wine making. While talking, Olaf led 6 English craftsmen into the brewing workshop. This workshop was transformed from a warehouse with a large space, large and small stoves and related utensils under the command of Olaf. The Vikings led the indigenous slaves to wash the sweet potatoes and then steam them in a pot. 2 hours after the completion of a set of procedures, Hunter and the others did not understand it, but it did not affect them to feel the high-end atmosphere, so they praised the Olaf factory again and talked about the taste of sweet potato wine and potato wine. Olaf remembered that it had been in the cellar for a few months. The sweet potato wine and potato wine should have been brewed. So he ordered people to open a tank and filter it first www.wuxiaspit.com and then use the distilled wine bought from Europe last year. The pot sits on the fire and is processed at high temperature, and finally takes some from the wine outlet and invites them to drink. Hunter's 6 are all technical personnel close to the middle class in Europe. They came to Vinland last year purely for £5 of silver a year. This income is twice as high as they are in the UK, so they are naturally willing to come as a technician with a good income. Hunter and others drank no less, but after drinking sweet potato wine and potato wine, they all gave very high evaluations. The sweet potato wine has a sweet taste, but it has some pungent irritation when swallowed, and the body becomes warm after being eaten. I think it is better than whiskey. Potato wine also has a light fragrance. This taste is very light, but the aftertaste is very charming. Hunter and the others were excited while drinking and talking. Olaf also took a sip with curiosity. He felt that the taste of the 2 wines was different from that of later generations of Beiji Ushachu. Maybe it was the ordinary distillation technique. The taste was strong, and the alcohol content was higher. The liquor of later generations is much worse. Roughly at the level of more than 30 degrees this wine is okay to drink. It has a higher strength than beer and wine, and maybe a bit higher than whiskey. I think many people will fall in love with it. Put down the cup, Olaf said with a soft touch. https://genius remembers this site address in 1 second. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 148, Water of Life. After tasting potato wine and sweet potato wine, Olaf sent 3 cans to the homes of big leaders such as Jot, Hagrid, Hudik, Kadir, and Hoskard. Whether they were at home or not, they had to give their gifts. Tos for the eldest brother Olav, who is far away in the Basque city. Olaf decided to send someone to send him a gold later. Father Hader doesn't need to give it to him. There were already a dozen cans in the family. In the first batch of brewing, Olaf prepared to honor his father's fine wine from the beginning. Olaf also gave a pot of potato wine to each of the 6 hunters. When they asked about the names of the 2 wines, Olaf remembered the extremely high degree water of life in later generations, so he said casually, "These 2, although the taste of wine is slightly different, the essence is similar, so they are all called the water of life, except that one is called moon water and the other is called sun water." The 6th hunter thanked Olaf and left. Olaf had a meal of boiled sweet potatoes and pickled radishes at the factory at noon, and then took his younger brother Half, who felt dull after seeing the factory's production process, left the factory, and was going to the caramel workshop on the riverbank to go home and sleep. Half, who was still willing to leave, laughed when he learned that he was going to the sugar workshop, and said, "Olaf, let's go on horseback. The water wheel workshop is too far." Olaf looked at Half and knew that his brother was gluttonous again on weekdays. There is a small can of sugar at home every week. As a result, Jelny and Half can always eat up in 2 or 3 days, which shows how attractive candies are to children. If it wasn't for the fear of eating sugar and bad teeth, Olaf could actually provide more for his younger brothers and sisters to eat. Go and lead the horse. Hurry up. Olaf and Half walked back home all the way. Before he could speak, Half loudly ordered the slave to go to the stable and lead 2 horses. Maybe the movement was big and heard by Jelny in the castle. The little girl hurried out and said, "Are you going to the sugar workshop?" "I want to go too." Olaf, who had turned on his horse, laughed and said, "Your nose is really good." After patting the horse, he said, "Come on." Although Jelny was gentler at home, but after all she had the blood of hero Heir flowing on her body. She practiced sword martial arts and equestrian skills on weekdays. She looked at the horses of Olaf and Half. "Some are tall, and I have a white reindeer in the stable," so I looked at the slave on the side and said coldly, "Go and bring my little Zixi." Because Olaf got up last year, most of the Vikings now have 1 or 2 sturdy reindeer in their homes for their children to ride. According to the standard of ordinary riding, if you don't go too far, the strongest reindeer can carry children weighing between 30 and 40 pounds to 50 or 60 pounds, and sometimes 70 or 80 pounds. But the stamina is not enough and they can't go far. Gurney is slender and slender. Riding a snow-white reindeer looks just perfect for each other. He is more beautiful than a horse, and he is not fast. Olaf and Half dared not ride too fast in order to take care of Jelny. The 3 of them rode 3 times before they arrived in front of the water wheel workshop. The Vikings and slaves at work greeted the 3 Olaf. Olaf nodded and was about to speak. Half and Gurney suddenly jumped off their horse and deer backs, and then he rushed into the workshop with a cheer, and one person pushed aside a slave who was stirring the caramel formation in the cauldron, then took out his clean wooden spoon from his arms and scooped a full spoonful, and then he blew and licked it contentedly. Olaf walked into the workshop and saw Half devouring the scalded hiss-ha-ha, while Jelny squinted his eyes and licked the syrup in the wooden spoon with his pink tongue. Glanced at several slaves who were a little panicked and at a loss. Olaf waved his hand and said, "You should be busy." Half. "Jelny, don't make trouble." Olaf's younger brother and sister still didn't dare not listen. They agreed and sat on the wooden table beside them to eat sweets. Olaf ignored them, and the Viking workers who held the 2 management workshops asked about the production situation today. "Master, today is the first day. In the morning, it seems that the upper river channel has not completely melted. The water volume is a little bit, and the preparation is very slow. It was only boiled at noon, and now it is all placed in a jar and placed in the corner. It's on the shelf. The water wheel will be easier to use in the afternoon. This first pot is almost ready, and it is estimated that 1 pot will be ready before dark." The man responsible for the management of the sugar workshop was Vakari, the white slave production captain who followed Olaf last year. He is a hunched dwarf. Although he is disabled, he is very clever, and his hands and feet are diligent, and he is quickly used by Olaf. Olaf looked down at Vakari and asked, "How many children are you at home?" "Isn't it the fourth?" Vakari shook his head and said, "Dad died before I was born. Later, my mother married twice. I have 4 older sisters and 1 older brother, as well as 5 half-brothers and 1 younger brother. But my mother and stepfather hated me, so I was kicked out of my home when I was an adult, so I was willing to come to Wenland, except for Piku." Olaf seldom chats with his subordinates, because he is too young and still the head of the oars, so he wants to deliberately maintain the majesty and mystery of the leader. Vakari's family situation Olaf only now knows for the first time, and he has no sympathy for what happened to Vakari, because there are too many unfortunate people in this era. "If you do things with your heart, I will not treat you badly. Believe me, your family will regret abandoning you in the future." Olaf patted Vakari on the shoulder and said in a deep voice. Vakari looked at Olaf fervently, nodded, and said, "I believe you. Master Paddlehead, I have now married a tall and plump wife with you." You reading www.uucan'tchoo.com. I know Icelandic Vikings. People have said about your miracle, and I also know that you are definitely a prophet who has been given wisdom by the Lord, and I am honored to be by your side. Olaf nodded, and said, "As long as you do things faithfully, you will be more fortunate in the future." "As you wish." Vakari bowed hurriedly, and then said, Vakari would like to be Olaf's loyal dog forever. After watching Sugar for a while, Half and Galney felt bored. The two of them ate sugar until their stomachs were full, and then they pestered Olaf to go hunting. Olaf thought that it was just after the severe winter, when the animals were most active. Hunting activities were indeed possible, so he smiled. "That's good. Let's go to the North Lake to fish in this afternoon, and we will go hunting until tomorrow. Tom and the others, brother is the best." Galney smiled and hugged Olaf in the cheers of Half, and then the 2 little guys rode on a gray horse and a white reindeer and ran towards the city of Heir. Because of hunting every year, there are almost no large and small animals in the surrounding area. However, Olaf is still worried that in the early spring, the Wenland white wolf and black bear, which had been hungry for a winter, would bump into the vicinity, in case they were injured. The younger brother and sister were in trouble, so they hurriedly turned on their horses and hurried forward, and at the same time they reached out and touched a matchlock gun in the leather pocket of the horse's back. https://Genius remembers this site address in 1 second. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 149, Fishing and Hunting. When Olaf caught up with Half and Galney, the two had already reached 3 scattered lakes in the northern part of Grote. Slowing down and waiting for his brother to catch up, the gray horse under Half's seat was still whistling his nose, neighing and flicking his tail, looking very lively, but the white reindeer under Galney's was a little sluggish. His mouth and nose flowed out of white sticky foam, and kept panting. "Rough, obviously tired, Olaf. Let's play." Half looked at his second brother provocatively and said, "Olaf knows that these lakes are filled with trout and salmon. They taste good, but they are not easy to catch. If you choose to fish, the river fish and lake fish on Vinland Island are obviously far inferior to the dense cod and cod in the fishing grounds off the island. Herring, plaice, etc. are easy to catch. It's just that Olaf and Half are purely for fun, so they don't care about the difficulty." The 2 brothers each cut a stout branch with good hardness from the tree by the lake, and then cut one end into a sharp thorn. This is a tool for thornfish. In rivers, lakes and seas, they choose to use stones to block the weirs in gentle areas, and then slowly release the water. In this way, a pond with more fish and less water is formed, and then the spearfish can be launched. Icelanders don't know this method, nor do other Europeans. Even the Viaduct people in Vinland have learned their craft from the Akismo, which is considered to be a fishing technique that has been passed down for thousands of years. Olaf and Half are not for catching many fish. Their status do not need to be engaged in production. Just like European nobles, they hunt for fun. The 2 brothers each took a wooden thorn and walked to the lake. They looked down along the gap in the rocks. They found big and small fish and waved their arms and stabbed them. The wooden thorns thumped and aroused a splash of water, and then one was still struggling with its tail. The trout was picked out by Olaf. Gurney applauded and cheered, and then shouted, "Half, you are behind." Olaf flicked his arm, and the fish on the wooden thorn flew to the shore with a swish, landing at Jelny's feet and struggling. When Jelny stepped on his leather boots, the fish stiffened. Half has good strength and eyesight, but he has an irritable personality. When he sees a fish in a stone, he keeps stabling it. As a result, he moves quite quietly, and the effect is not good. After waiting for an hour, Olaf stabbed 8 fish, But Half caught only 3 and slipped and fell into the mud. Gurney laughed at his younger brother Half, who was very unconvinced, while Olaf smiled. Pick up the fish and take them home. Today, the slaves can drink fish soup. The 3 pierced a fish with a wood, then hung them on the saddle, and the 3 went home. When it got home, it was already dark. Olaf threw 2 strings of fish to the slaves in the house, and the 3 of them pushed the door and walked into the warm castle. Hader and Catelyn were sitting on the sofa drinking water and talking, and when they saw Olaf and the 3 come back, Half was still covered in mud. They laughed. Go and change clothes, Olaf whispered, and Half quickly ran back to his room. What did you do? Half put down his cup and asked Dad. Olaf took us to fish, and he said he will take me to hunt someday. Gaelny sat next to his father and said happily. Hader nodded and said, very good. We Vikings are heroic and versatile. Now that the weather is warm, you may go out and run more. But you can't go too far. After all, there are still many white wolves on the peninsula. Drag. After sitting for a while, Catelyn went to cook. Gaelny also left to change clothes. Olaf remembered his own thoughts in the morning, and said to his father, Dad, do you think that Wenland, as a free state, still lacks what? Hader was so busy all day, there was no time to think about what Olaf said, so after listening to it, he hesitated and thought for a long time before saying, compared with Iceland and other countries, I feel that Vinland currently lacks churches and priests. If there are churches and pastors and elders, there will also be schools and scholars, and people can have places to worship every week. Olaf knew that Hader was the big landlord of Iceland in the 17th century. He could think that this layer was already very enlightened. After all, the church can stabilize the hearts of the people, and the affiliated church schools can impart knowledge. Olaf nodded in agreement. Dad, what you think is good. I also think that we lack churches. We Vikings and the children of contract white slaves have no way to learn words and knowledge. This is not conducive to Wenland's development. I think this year we should invite some Protestant priests from Europa. We can also invite a few literate Puritans in Plymouth. First we will open a school to teach the language. You think very well. I can say hello to Kadir and ask him to choose a few literate Puritans and even priests. Hader thought for a while and said Olaf attaches great importance to Wenland School, but he also understands that education often determines the existence of ideology, why the Middle East is the base of Shinfang religion, and Europe is the base of Catholicism and Christianity, because the mosques and churches depend on people. The living area is established, and it holds the education rights of children and children. How can it be possible to cultivate pious believers without cultivating pious believers? Olaf does not dislike Christianity. He believes that the Protestant reform is correct. The Church's control of secular power and the plunder of national wealth must be controlled or even eliminated. Otherwise, the state government will not have the ability to protect itself and will only become a vassal of the Church. Now Wenland's adoption of Protestantism is a long-awaited event for Icelanders and contracted white slaves. Everyone is a devout Christian believer. Naturally, we hope that there will be a sacred church to worship in order to seek peace in the spiritual world, and at the same time to educate our children. The problem can also be solved in addition to propagating religious beliefs and spreading ideologies rooted in Christian doctrine. The Protestant Church has no conflict with the royal rule. If the Puritans or even Lutheran and Calvinist priests are introduced to preach, it will not harm Hader's rule, but it will still popularize education and stabilize people's hearts. But Olaf thought of a danger, that is, advanced Christian culture can also destroy the primitive religious beliefs of the Vietics and other native Indians. In fact, it would be harmless to destroy it. But now Hader has just replaced the indigenous people's belief in gods with himself. In the future, the incarnation of Hader gods and their descendant families will be the foundation of the indigenous beliefs of Indians. www.wuxiaspit.com and the ideological propaganda and basis for ruling primitive aboriginals. If Protestant priests flood into Vinland, they will definitely preach to the native Indians, which will inevitably impact the sacred status of the incarnation of the gods of the Hader family. Olaf expressed his thoughts, and Hader was also very vigilant, rubbing his chin and said, it should be much better if we choose old and timid priests. How about we restrict their missionary activities? Can we follow them 24 hours? Olaf shook his head and said, I think that Protestant priests must be used, but at present, I can only find 1 or 2 priests who are easy to control. The scope of worship and preaching in the future, we think we can look for priests from Iceland, Norway and other Nordic regions, because our priests from the Nordic region are not as rigid as the southern priests. They even have many remarks that blend our primitive religious culture with a biblical culture. For example, The appearance of the image of Santa Claus is that they merge with our traditional religious culture based on the vague description of the Bible. They think it is the deviation of people's understanding of God. I think we can allow these people to preach in the future, and even through them integrate the primitive religious beliefs of the Indians with our primitive Viking beliefs and Christian beliefs to create a pan-Viking religion that is acceptable to Vikings and slaves. https://Genius remembers this site address in 1 second. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 150, Religious State Circles and Celestial Vassal Circles. Olaf's words have had a great impact on Hader. Although Hader has also been influenced by Nordic primitive religion since he was a child, he is essentially the same as all Icelanders. He is the Lamb of the Lord. He maintains Christianity and the Bible. With a confident attitude now Olaf persuaded Hader in an attitude of using religion, which made Hader's conscience uneasy, and said with trembling lips, "The Bible is extremely correct and sacred. How can faith be merged? Olaf, pay attention to your words, the Lord is everywhere. If we blaspheme the future, we will go to hell." Olaf saw that his brave father turned pale now, knowing that he could no longer proceed, and at the same time realizing that the exclusivity of Christianity was very tricky, so he shrugged and said, "Okay. What I want to say is, before the foundation of our rule is solid, Indian slaves should not be qualified to believe in the Lord Jesus, and they should also believe in the bloodline of the original incarnation. If you want to invite priests from Plymouth to run a school and preach, I have no objection." Hader can fully understand Olaf's remarks. He smiled and nodded, and said, "I understand what you mean, and I will treat it with caution. This year, Olaf is in Basque City, and Kadir is in Plymouth. You and Hudik, let's take a trip to Europe. By the way, invite some priests from Norway and Iceland. Wenland is going to become a kingdom in the future. How can it be a wilderness without the glory of the Lord?" Hader finally got up to pee after he said a sentence with emotion. Olaf is very clear about what his father meant. In this cultural circle where belief in Christianity means entering into a civilized cultural circle, in this era when the king's succession requires the coronation of a church, if Hader wants to become the king of Vinland and even the king of America, he must have a church support and recognition, regardless of any denomination, even if it is just a qualified elder of Lutheran sect, as long as he can be approved by the church and crowned in the ceremony. Hader is the one who has the power to rule with the approval of the gods in civilized circles. Only the kings of Lan and other places can have the qualifications to communicate on an equal footing with countries in Europe and the world. This unwritten rule is because European civilization is now unified into a Christian civilization, so European countries are essentially religious countries. At first they regarded the Pope as a spiritual leader, and later converted to Protestantism and embraced Christianity as the state religion. It can be said that Europe is currently civilization is Christian culture and civilization. It belongs to the cultural circle of religious countries. If you don't follow the circle culture, you cannot join the circle. If you cannot join the circle, you will be excluded and suppressed, and even be invaded and destroyed unless this person outside the circle is a big man, an existence that cannot be shaken by the European Christian circle. It's a pity that Wenland is not. Hader's faith also makes him want to squeeze into this circle. Olaf can fully understand this. Ref does not believe in Christ, but he also maintains respect for religion. He understands that the status of Christianity in Europe is no less than that of Confucianism in the heavens. Here Confucianism is a religious school. Not that Confucianism is a religion. European kings must be crowned by the Pope, Bishop, Patriarch and other priests to be legitimate. This is exactly the same as the fact that the kings of small kingdoms in the celestial circle must be authorized by the edict of the suzerain. Essentially speaking, it is cultural identity and universal value transmission. The cultural performance of the celestial dynasty is very superior and powerful. Countries that do not want to be left behind or even aspire to civilization must squeeze into this circle, and even replace them after they become strong through learning. Do a devil repair. The same is true for the religious circles in Europe. The only difference is that there is no great unification in Europe, and all circles are striving to be the leader. There is only one-sided religious and cultural identity, but there is no overwhelming religious kingdom. Otherwise the relationship between suzerain and vassal will behave 100 times stronger than the heavenly dynasty. Olaf originally wanted to talk about finding a doctor, but when he was stimulated by Hader's performance, Olaf's brain was full of distracting thoughts. Leaning back and sinking into the sofa, Olaf felt that if he wanted to make good use of the indigenous Indians with a large population in North America, he absolutely could not promote Christianity. He still had to myth the heir family and create the blood of the gods, just like the Emperor of Japan. Only in this way can the minority rule the ignorant majority. Olaf believes that while relying on Viking thunder to absorb personnel and integrate the collective consciousness to ensure the stability of the ruling group, it must also absorb the methods of the Japanese emperor, mythical leader, to myth his own family, so that he can have the most legitimate right to rule the native Indians. Vikings represent civilization and nobility. Vikings who are predominantly white must be naturalized Christians. Olaf felt that no matter he or his father, he must not try to challenge the status of Christian faith in the hearts of white people. It will be a matter of time before land builds a church, but as long as the church is built, the priest's preaching will have an impact on the indigenous people. When there are more indigenous people who believe in Christianity, the sacred ruling position of the heir family ceases to exist. Therefore, Olaf felt that the first thing to do was to restrict and control the spread of religion in Wendland. In the future, it is even necessary to set up a religious bureau for special management. Religious belief must become a tool of politics, not the master of politics, otherwise it is not a good thing for the country, the people, and the ruler. Olaf is not a believer in Christianity. Strictly speaking, he is an atheist. He considers everything about religion, thinking about how it can benefit his family's rule and the development and growth of the Viking Raiden rights group. After thinking of regulating the religious activities of Christian churches in Vinland, Olaf also thought of a better once-and-for-all method, which is what he said with his father Hader just now, worshipping Christianity in Indian primitive gods and Northern European primitives. The great integration of mythology creates a Viking nation with a cultural and religious foundation, creates a tenable religious culture. A hodgepodge of Nordic mythology and the worship of primitive gods in a Christian skin bag. Control, and will not be squeezed out by the European civilization circle. It's just that Olaf can't do it himself. He has to find professionals who have deep insights into Norse mythology and Christianity. Become a blasphemer, a public enemy of the world. After all, religion is serious. Judaism was improved because of the different cultures and opinions of the believers and finally separated into Catholicism. As a result, the two religions became enemies. During the Tang dynasty in China, the religion was separated again, and the three religions were even more human brains. Hit the dog brain. www.wuxiaspit.com. In the past few hundred years, Catholicism has split into Eastern Orthodox, Protestant sects and other branches, resulting in the Catholicism, Protestantism, and Eastern Orthodox also fighting each other within the church, and even triggering the 30 Years' War, etc. Many wars, many sects born in Judaism even affect the world structure of the 21st century later, because of the uniqueness and exclusivity of religion. Dynasty religions are good at accommodating religious wars and religious oppression that have never existed, so they have led the world in thought for thousands of years. For the religious reform he wanted to do, Olaf used Christianity as the basis to integrate the elements of Nordic mythology and Indian primitive worship, and finally created a Protestant Christian sect that did not cause too much hostility and hatred for Christianity and could help the Olaf family rule the most. Today's Catholicism and Christianity are not the mascots of later generations. They still have a lot of influence and power. Although it is a bit exaggerated to rejuvenate the country and subjugate the country with one word, it can be done to the same level. A few decades later, Charles isn't a Gillett in the Puritans' handwriting, of course. If the current Christianity has become the thing that can be transformed into cult at will, Olaf and his sons will not take it seriously, and even dare to order the abolition of Christianity in Wendland and the resurrection of Nordic polytheism to let the people believe in the Odin and Thor, so as to promote the castrated and Vikings to regain the glory of the berserker. https://Genius remembers this site address in 1 second, mobile version reading URL. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.